Hey guys, tonight's story begins with a sack full of holes, a stick that looks more afraid than you are, and the sound of something squeaking just out of sight. You're not in a barn, not in a cellar. You're in the village granary, and the shadows are alive. The first rat you see isn't small. It's the size of a loaf of bread with scars to prove it's been in more battles than you'll ever survive. And suddenly, you realize you're not here to catch them. You're here to audition for their respect. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You've barely had breakfast, a gray lump that might have once been bread, or perhaps just regret in loaf form, and someone's already pointing toward the edge of the village, with the sort of smile that means bad news for you and entertainment for them. Down you go, they say, and you, because you're not yet fluent in the ancient art of saying no, take the shovel, the bucket, and the long stick with a hook on the end, and walk toward your destiny with all the joy of a man headed toward his own eulogy. The latrine pits squat behind the row of cottages like secrets that no one wants to admit to, but everyone contributes to. There are 4 of them, in a row, sunken into the earth like the village itself tried to forget they existed by burying them deeper. You approach the nearest one and gag, not because you're weak, but because your body, in a rare show of self-preservation, is trying to escape through your own throat. The air is thick, sticky, and hostile. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your memories. Even your shadow tries to edge away from the pit. You've heard the phrase hell on earth before. This is hell under it. Your job, they said, is simple. Retrieve the waste, empty the pit, dispose of the contents responsibly, which, in village terms, means far enough away that the cows don't complain. You stare into the pit. It stares back. There are bubbles. One pops. You flinch. You wonder briefly if there's a saint for this kind of thing. Saint Splatula, perhaps, patron of the putrid, guardian of the unloved. If there is, he's not listening. With a breath you immediately regret, you lower yourself into the muck. Not fully, not yet. There's a ladder, wooden, wet, and audibly resentful. You descend one rung at a time, each step accompanied by squelches that feel deeply personal. The pit is warm. It should not be warm. Things move in it. You pretend they don't. One of them might have been a shoe. The villagers don't talk to you anymore. Not directly. They speak around you, near you, over you, but never to. Children used to laugh when you passed. Now they hold their breath. One offered you a flower once. It wilted in your hand. You still think about that flower. It knew. With the hook, you fish out an unholy combination of rags, sticks, something that might once have been part of a goat, and an item you choose not to identify. It hisses when it hits daylight. The bucket fills slowly, too slowly. The shovel barely cuts through the sludge. It's less a tool now, and more a vague suggestion. The sun rises higher, as if trying to distance itself from what you're doing. Somewhere nearby, someone is baking bread. You hate them. Not personally, just philosophically. The idea that someone's biggest problem today is whether the crust is too dark, while you're waist-deep in communal digestion feels like an imbalance the universe really ought to look into. You remember when they offered you the job. Essential work, they said. Crucial to the health of the village. They didn't mention the smell, or the noises, or how the stench would follow you like a loyal, deeply upsetting pet. They just handed you the stick and pointed toward the pits like it was a rite of passage and not the beginning of your social exile. Halfway through the second pit, you discover a frog, a living one, It blinks at you. You blink back. Neither of you knows what the other is doing here, but you both silently agree not to ask questions. The frog hops onto the rim of the bucket and then away, never to be seen again. You envy him. The sun is higher now, though it offers no comfort. Your arms ache, your legs tremble. You smell like a crime against nature. You begin to wonder if you still have a nose or if it surrendered hours ago. Once, you tried to mask the scent with herbs. Lavender, rosemary, even a sprig of mint tucked behind your ear. The mint withered on contact. Now you don't bother. Even the flies keep a respectful distance. You dump another bucket into the cart, the wheel of which squeals like it's being punished for your sins. The cart is old, lopsided, and smells worse than the pits, if that's even possible. You'll haul it later to the dumping field, which is generously called the back pasture, but should really be called a mistake. By late afternoon, you're on the final pit. The worst one, the deepest. It's developed a personality. You name it Bartholomew, because if you're going to suffer, you might as well suffer in the company of names. Bartholomew gurgles ominously as you lower the bucket. You whisper threats. He bubbles in response. When you're finally done, covered in things that defy classification, you stagger out of the pit like a man reborn in darkness. The breeze hits your face and recoils. You rinse your hands in the barrel. It turns brown. The water weeps. You head toward the dumping field, pushing the cart with the grace of a dying mule. Every bump in the path is a new testament to misery. A bit sloshes onto your foot. You say nothing. There are no words left, only pain. At the edge of the field, you tip the bucket. It lands with a sound that scars your soul. You watch it spread like a dark truth across the grass. The cows will avoid this patch for months. You nod in satisfaction. That, at least, is something. As you walk back toward the village, a child holding a sweet bun points at you and whispers, "The Pooh Man." You wave. He drops the bun. You consider picking it up, but even you have standards. The baker offers you a leftover heel of bread. You accept it like a gift from a god, even though it tastes like dust and defeat. You chew it slowly, staring at the sky. It does not stare back. You return home. You remove your boots. They scream softly. You peel off your tunic. It peels back. You sit by the fire and sigh. The pit is empty. You are not. You are full of knowledge, of resilience, of things no one should ever have to know. You'll do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, because someone must, because the village must function, because dignity is a luxury, and you are very, very essential. And besides, you named a frog today. That's something. The pond looks peaceful at first, serene, even. A mirror of sky cradled in reeds, rimmed with soft mud and the quiet gossip of frogs. You approach with cautious optimism and a long stick, the sort handed to you by someone who absolutely didn't explain what it was for. "Just stir the shallows," they said. "They'll find you." They didn't elaborate on who they were. You now understand that was deliberate. You step into the water, slow as a sinner at confession. It's cold in a way that feels personal, like the pond itself has opinions about your ankles. The mud sucks at your feet with a sound you will later try very hard to forget. A dragonfly zips past your nose, smug and dry. You try humming to distract yourself, something light, cheerful. A traveling tune about ducks and destiny. You get as far as the second verse before you feel the first one. It doesn't hurt. Not exactly. It's more of a tickle, a suggestion, a whisper against your shin that becomes a nibble, that becomes a wriggle, that becomes a situation. You glance down. You shouldn't have. There are 5 already. One is the size of an old man's thumb and looks like it's smiling. You're not sure where its face is, but it's definitely smiling. This is not science. This is not natural medicine. This is unpaid therapy with blood loss. The leeches attach themselves with the confidence of tax collectors and the moral compass of drunk raccoons. You have a small jar strapped to your belt because you are supposed to collect them, apparently. Not swat them, not scream and run into the hills. Collect them, as if they are rare gems and not skin-slurping horrors with more teeth than friends. You dip the stick into the water and swirl. More arrive. They love the movement. They love you. You are a warm, wiggling snack with legs. You flick one off, and it lands on your boot and stays there. Offended. You apologize. You don't know why. You are beginning to lose your grip on who's in charge here. A duck floats by, staring. You nod at it, trying to appear calm. It turns and paddles away, radiating judgment. You lean forward, collect a leech in the jar using the spoon-shaped scoop they gave you. The leech does not want to be scooped. It elongates. It coils. It makes a sound you think might be a hiss, but you know that's probably just your own soul protesting. Into the jar it goes. You shake it triumphantly. It immediately starts climbing the glass. You lower the jar and reevaluate every decision that led to this moment. By midday, your legs look like an artist tried to paint freckles using nightmares and despair. The leeches range in color from soot to despair to what might be moss, and they all have the same commitment to their job that you do not. Your blood trickles politely down your calves. You are told this is good for circulation. You suspect that was made up by someone who wanted to justify medieval vampirism as healthcare. The village healer, a woman who speaks exclusively in mutters and smells like vinegar and disappointment, insists this is valuable work. Balance the humors, she says. Drain the corruption. You are beginning to believe the only thing being drained is your will to live. A child passes by on the path, holding a turnip and a rat like it's a normal Wednesday. He sees you in the pond, covered in aquatic tapeworms with ambitions, and says, "Are they biting yet?" You say nothing. He throws the rat into the reeds and walks off. You are too tired to ask questions. A breeze picks up. It is the first kind thing that has happened to you all day. It ruffles your hair, cools your cheeks, and sends 2 leeches wriggling down your shin into the water again. You cheer quietly. You will regret that later when they come back with friends. The mud deepens. You step into a patch that seems solid and promptly sink up to your knees. You flail. The jar tips. 3 leeches escape. You retrieve them. You apologize again. You do not know to whom. Perhaps to the pond. Perhaps to yourself. By late afternoon, your skin feels oddly loose, like it's considering resigning. The jar is mostly full. You shake it proudly. One of the leeches sticks to the inside of the lid and waves at you. You feel dizzy. Someone offers you a chunk of bread from the shore. You accept it gratefully, only to realize it has raisins. You eat it anyway. You no longer have the energy to object to raisins. You exit the pond slowly, covered in bites, blood, mud, and the vague aroma of desperation. The leeches still clinging to you are plucked off and dropped into a second jar, the healer's personal stash. She thanks you in a tone that somehow suggests she's still mildly disappointed in your performance. You bow stiffly. Your knees nearly give out. You are paid in a single coin and a soft pat on the head. You cannot tell if it's meant as comfort or pest control. You shuffle toward your home with the gait of someone who has donated too much of himself to the ecosystem. The next morning, you'll do it again, because the healer says the Baron is requesting a fresh batch for his migraines, because the healer says there's value in this, because someone has to be the buffet, and apparently, this week, that someone is you. You're handed a stick, a net with a hole in it, and a burlap sack that smells like something died in it several weeks ago, and then rented it out to something else that also died. The village elder pats you on the back with the kind of enthusiasm that feels suspiciously like guilt, and gestures toward the granary with a solemn nod. "Do your duty," he says, as if you're heading off to war, which, as it turns out, you are. Except your enemies are smaller, faster, and armed with very sharp teeth. The grain stores are just a large wooden shed with a padlock that serves more as a decoration than a deterrent. Inside, The air is thick with dust, mold, and what might be the ghost of last year's wheat. Burlap sacks line the walls like squat little fortresses, each one already showing signs of chewing. Not minor nibbles either. These are industrial-level gnawings, strategic, purposeful, calculated. You take a breath. You raise your stick. You announce your presence to the shadows with a brave little grunt. The shadows respond with silence, and then the soft, unmistakable sound of something squeaking and scurrying just behind you. You spin. There's nothing, or, more accurately, there is everything. But it's all just slightly faster than you. The first rat appears atop a sack near the back. It's large. Not large like a normal rat. Large like a loaf of bread with a tail. Its fur is a mottled gray. Its ears torn from battles you'll never understand. And its left eye is missing, replaced with a vague air of vengeance. You lock eyes. You nod. He does not. You name him Gregory. Gregory does not blink. Gregory does not move. Gregory judges you. Then, with an elegant flick of his tail, he disappears into the sacks. You do not see him again for several hours, but his presence will haunt you. You begin the sweep. You poke at the bags. You shout encouraging things to yourself. Get out of here, you vile beasts. You yell, in a tone that could be generously described as trembling. Something rustles behind you. You turn too quickly and trip over your own sack. The stick flies from your hand. The net snags on a beam. The hole in it widens slightly, possibly out of spite. From the rafters above, 5 rats peer down at you. One of them yawns. Another scratches its belly. You're fairly certain the third is playing a tiny lute. You try to intimidate them by throwing a pebble. The pebble misses and hits the door. The door swings open. 6 more rats enter. It occurs to you that the rats do not fear you. It further occurs to you that they may, in fact, see you as part of the decor, a moving fixture, possibly a vending machine. You lunge forward with the net. 1 rat darts left. Another leaps over your foot. The third climbs directly up your pant leg. You scream. You spin. The rat clings to you like a very warm, very mobile brooch. You stumble into the wall and drop the net. The rat leaves the way it came, and you are not the same person anymore. By midday, you've managed to corner 3 small rats in a barrel. You consider this a victory. Then, the barrel tips over, and the rats escape. One lingers just long enough to make direct eye contact. You're pretty sure it winks. You sit on a sack to gather yourself. The sack sags beneath you and emits a suspicious squeak. You leap up. A tiny, angry nose pokes out of the rip. You apologize to the rat, and to the sack, and to the concept of dignity in general. Gregory returns around sundown. He perches on a beam like a gargoyle, watching your every move. You wave the stick in a slow arc, and say something heroic under your breath. Gregory blinks. You think he's disappointed in you. A villager arrives to check your progress. He asks how many you've caught. You say, a few, which is technically true if you consider seeing them with your eyes as part of the catching process. He nods gravely and hands you a wedge of hard cheese. Bait, he says. You place the cheese in the center of the room and step back. A rat saunters out, sniffs it, and then drags the cheese into a crack in the wall without breaking eye contact. You no longer feel like the protagonist in your own story. As darkness settles, the rats grow bolder. They squeak at each other in code. They climb in and out of holes you didn't know existed. They run across your boots like you're part of the flooring. You swing the stick in lazy circles, more out of rhythm than threat. You think one of them is choreographing. Eventually, you give up trying to win. You focus instead on containment. You patch holes with straw and cloth. You stack sacks in defensive formations. You mutter warnings to the corners. Gregory sits calmly, cleaning his whiskers, offering no assistance. By the time the moon rises, you've captured exactly 2 rats in the sack. They are both very young, very confused, and very angry. You tie the sack gently and place it outside the granary. The elder picks it up and peers inside, then peers at you. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. You walk home in silence. Your clothes smell like grain dust and failure. Your hands are covered in tiny bite marks. Your dignity is somewhere under a pile of half-eaten barley. You pass the child with the rat from yesterday. He holds it up and waves. You nod. Gregory is still watching from the granary roof. You feel it. He owns that place now. You were never in charge. Not really. Tomorrow, you'll return with a new stick, a slightly smaller hole in the net, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, Gregory will find a new hobby. He won't. The good news is, they've given you a cart. The kind with 2 solid wheels and a handle worn smooth by too many hands. It creaks like an old man remembering something he'd rather forget. The bad news is the cart is for bodies, not metaphorical ones, not the weight of your past mistakes, the actual, literal corpses. And it's your job to collect them. They hand you a bell. It's small, rusted, and has a chip in the rim that makes it ring slightly off, like a note that doesn't quite want to be heard. You are told to ring it as you walk the streets. Warning, they say. Courtesy, they call it. As if the sound will help. As if death cares about manners. You start just after dawn, when the mist is still curled around the thatch rooftops and the air has that hopeful chill before the sun rises. You ring the bell once and wait. Nothing. You step forward, cart creaking, wheels screaming like they know what's coming and want no part in it. You ring again. Still nothing. Then a door opens. Just a crack. A hand gestures. A voice too quiet to carry, too tired to care, says only, "Back room." You do not ask questions. You never ask questions anymore. The first body is small, wrapped in linen that's been tied with string. There's no smell yet. Just silence. You lift gently, though there's no one left to feel it. You place them in the cart and pull the sheet up a little higher, as if modesty still matters on this street. Maybe it does. You move on. Sometimes they leave them on the doorstep. That's easier. You don't have to go inside, don't have to see the walls covered in talismans, the herbs hung over doorways, the frantic attempts at protection that came too late. Sometimes the door is open and the house is empty, and you know there are more upstairs. Those take longer. The stairs always creak. The beds always look slept in. You always pretend they died peacefully. You cover your face with a rag soaked in vinegar, time, and denial. It doesn't work. The smell finds a way. It always finds a way. You breathe through your mouth. It's worse. You breathe through your memories, but those are starting to smell too. You tell yourself not to look, not to guess ages, not to find names in their faces. It's easier that way, but you are not good at doing things the easy way. The third body is a boy with straw-colored hair and a little wooden horse tucked in his blanket. You leave the horse. You do not take souvenirs. You are not a thief, but you remember his face, and later, you will name him Thomas. The bell rings again. The sound echoes off stone and wood and grief. A cat watches from a rooftop. You envy the cat. The cat has never had to carry anything heavier than a bird. By noon, the cart is half full, and your back aches. Not just from the weight, but from what the weight means. You pause near the well and sip from your flask. It tastes like metal and herbs, and the kind of regret that doesn't wash off. You close your eyes and imagine being somewhere else. It doesn't help. A woman waves you over. She won't come outside. She stands just inside her doorway, wrapped in blankets, a shawl covering her face. Her eyes are red. "My husband," she says, and steps aside. You go in. You don't touch anything except what you must. He's on the floor, near the hearth, still warm. You hope. You lift him gently. She doesn't watch. You pass her on the way out. She doesn't say goodbye. You place him in the cart, beside the boy, beside the others. You ring the bell again. It's louder now. Not because you're ringing it harder, but because the streets are emptier. Echoes stretch farther when there's no one left to absorb them. You stop near the chapel, not inside. You're not welcome there anymore. The priest got sick last week. You collected him yourself. The replacement priest refuses to come out. You don't blame him. The burial ground is a field now. It used to be a meadow. Children once ran through it chasing beetles and sunbeams. Now there are trenches. Long, straight, wide ones. Rows of them. Dug too fast. Filled too slow. You back the cart up to the edge. The gravediggers look away. You do it yourself, one by one. Gently, like they might wake. You try not to look at faces. You fail. You try not to count. You fail. You try not to cry. You mostly succeed. You mark each trench with a small stone. Just one. No names. There are too many, but you remember them. In your way. You keep a list in your head. Not written, just remembered. There's Thomas, and the woman with the shawl, and the boy with the crooked teeth, who once threw a turnip at your cart and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. You picked him up yesterday. On the walk back, you try to hum a tune, something your mother used to sing. You can't remember the words. You can't even remember the melody, just the way it felt. Warm, safe. Not here. You return the cart to the shed and rinse it with water from a barrel that smells worse than the cart did. The wheels moan in protest. You ignore them. You hang the bell on the nail above the door. It still rings slightly even after you stop touching it. The rag comes off your face and you breathe deep, hoping for fresh air. There isn't any. There never is anymore. Just more mist, more dust, more work tomorrow. You walk home slowly. Past the empty houses, past the closed shutters, past the street where children used to play, and now only rats run. You wonder how long until they ring the bell for you. You wake up to the sound of someone vomiting behind the tannery. This is your alarm clock now. You no longer ask who it is. Might be the butcher's apprentice again. Might be the new boy. Might be you, spiritually. You pull on your socks, which are still damp from yesterday's shift, and try not to think about why they never seem to dry. The sky is the same gray color as everything else in this town. The mud, the river, your soul. They call it tanning, which sounds deceptively elegant, like something involving silk gloves and small, delicate hammers. It is not. It is the act of transforming the rotting skins of dead animals into usable leather via a process so foul it makes the latrine pit smell like a bakery. You are the assistant, which is a polite way of saying you do all the stirring. You arrive at the yard and are immediately greeted by a man with no eyebrows and a wide, toothless smile. You still don't know his name, but he calls you in a tone that feels like an insult. He gestures toward the vat. You know the one. You hoped today would be the day they made you scrape instead, or dry, or maybe die. But no, today is stirring day. The vat is filled with something that used to be water and is now mostly urine, dung, crushed bark, and ambition's corpse. It steams in the morning chill like it's trying to escape itself. You pick up the stirring paddle. It is a long stick, slightly curved, stained in a palette of browns that would make any painter cry. The smell hits you before the stick does. It's sharp and soft at the same time, like a slap with a damp cloth soaked in betrayal. They tell you to stir it gently. There is no gentle in this job, only thick resistance and the feeling of every bad decision clinging to your boots. You begin. The hides inside the vat slosh and shift with a squelch that reminds you of chewing gristle. They've been soaking for days, maybe weeks. You think one of them might be moving, but it's probably just the fumes affecting your vision again. You stir clockwise. No one told you it mattered, but the one time you stirred counterclockwise, the foreman coughed directly into your face and muttered something about disrupting the spirits. You didn't press the issue. Around the edge of the yard, other workers go about their routines with the sort of quiet despair only truly noble tradesmen can achieve. One man scrapes hair from a hide with a blunt knife and hums a love song. Another flings a rinsed pelt over a drying rack and immediately wipes his hand on his own shirt, which somehow makes it worse. You nod at them. They do not nod back. You stir until your arms ache. The hides resist you, as though they resent being transformed. You resent it too. You did not dream of this. You dreamed of being a falconer once. You had a drawing of a falcon, even. It got eaten by a goat 2 years ago, and you took it as a sign. Eventually, the foreman comes by to inspect your progress. He lifts a hide from the vat and sniffs it. You do not know why. You do not ask. He nods, mutters "getting there," and drops it back in with a splash that soaks your knees. You feel warmth seep into your socks again, and this time you do not flinch. There is a break for lunch. You are handed a crust of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon, and a cup of thin beer that tastes faintly of ashes and maybe carrots. You sit by the fence and eat in silence, your back still twitching from the stirring. A dog walks past with something in its mouth. You hope it's not one of the hides. You do not investigate. Afternoon brings scraping. You are promoted, briefly, to the beam, a large wooden bench where hides are stretched and scraped clean of flesh and fat. This is better than the vat, if only because it does not slosh. You place a hide on the beam and begin. It resists. They always do. You think about naming this one. You think maybe Rupert. You wonder if Rupert was once a goat or a cow or something more exotic. You hope not a dog. You do not ask. Scraping is meditative, in the way that long, repetitive tasks involving dead things and sharp blades can be. You lose yourself in the motion. Push, pull, scrape, fold. The hide begins to resemble leather. The foreman grunts approval. You feel a flicker of pride. Then the blade slips, and you scrape your thumb. Just a nick. But now you're bleeding into Rupert. You wonder if that makes you part of the tanning process now. Maybe that's how they got that deep red leather last season. You decide not to ask. Evening falls and the air grows thick. The yard begins to empty, workers trailing home with hunched shoulders and stained clothes. You rinse the paddle and stack it against the wall. You know it won't be clean. It hasn't been clean since it was a tree. But you pretend. You wring out your socks. It makes a sound like apology. The foreman claps you on the back and says, "Good stirring today." You nod. This is the closest thing to a compliment you've received in weeks. You treasure it in the same part of your brain where you once stored hope. You walk home through the alleys, leaving little wet footprints that smell faintly of ammonia and crushed bark. A child sees you and runs the other way. You understand. You would run from you too. At home, you sit in a chair that no longer creaks because it gave up years ago. You take off your boots. You don't bother with the socks. They have become part of you. You stare at the ceiling and imagine a world without hides, without vats, without the phrase, "Stir it gently." Tomorrow, the vat will be waiting. So will Rupert. You are not a doctor. You've never studied anatomy. You've never been to a university, or even near one, unless you count that time you delivered turnips to a monk with gout. But one day you pulled a splinter from your cousin's foot with your bare fingers and a surprising lack of screaming, and now the village has decided you are a dentist. They say it with a kind of reverence, as if you've been chosen. You try to explain you don't know what you're doing. Someone hands you a pair of rusty iron pliers and claps you on the back. You'll figure it out, they say. You do not. Your first patient is an old man named Edric, who smells like onions and regret. He has 2 teeth left, and claims one of them is plotting against him. You inspect his mouth with the seriousness of someone looking for a rat in a tunnel. The offending tooth is blackened and leans at an angle that suggests it's given up trying. You nod like you've seen this sort of thing before. You have not. Edric nods back. He is trusting you, which feels unfair to both of you. You instruct him to sit on a stool that wobbles slightly, perhaps in anticipation. You wrap a cloth around your face, not for hygiene, but so no one can see the panic rising behind your eyes. You hold up the pliers. They do not look like medical tools. They look like something you'd use to repair a fence, or remove a horseshoe, or commit a murder in a very slow and personal way. You tell Edric to say, "Ah." He does. You say it with him, louder. There is no good reason. You reach in, clamp down, and pull. Edric screams. You scream. The stool tips. You both end up on the ground. You roll apart, breathless. In your hand, somehow, is a tooth. It might be his. You hold it up triumphantly like you've won a prize at a very cursed fair. Edric thanks you through a mouth full of blood and surprise. You hand him a cloth. He hands you a chicken. The chicken is alive. It looks at you like it knows what you've done. You consider retiring immediately, but then word gets out. Because of course it does. The village has not had a successful tooth removal since the miller tried using a rock and a string and accidentally took out his own eye. You become, overnight, a legend. You do not want to be a legend. You want to be invisible. The chicken roosts on your doorstep and stares at you as you eat. You name her Clotilda. She does not like you. Your next patient is a woman named Anwin with a jaw like a brick and nerves of steel. She sits without flinching as you examine a molar that looks like it has declared independence. You attempt the same technique as before. Grip, yank, pray. But the tooth holds fast, like it was welded in by spite. You pull harder. Anwin sighs. You feel sweat forming in places you did not know could sweat. You adjust your angle. You brace against her knee. You pull again. The tooth comes free with a sickening pop that echoes in your bones. You stumble backward, holding it aloft like a trophy. Anwin nods, spits blood onto the floor, and gives you a turnip. You are now the proud owner of one chicken and a turnip. Neither of them likes you. Children begin to follow you around. They chant "Tooth Wizard" in sing-song voices. You try to correct them. They do not listen. A child asks if you can fix his goat's teeth. You say, "No." He gives you a sad look and leaves. The goat returns later on its own. You pretend not to notice. You develop a system. Patients sit on the stool. You ask them to point to the pain. You inspect, always with the same expression, somewhere between confident and vaguely haunted. You reach in, grip, yank. Sometimes you get a tooth, sometimes you get two. Sometimes you get nothing but a scream and an accidental headbutt. You carry bruises like badges. You begin wearing a thicker cloth over your face, not for germs, just to muffle your own whimpers. One day, someone asks you about cleaning teeth. You say, "Sure." You don't mean it. You invent a paste made from crushed mint leaves and vinegar. It smells like disappointment, but tastes worse. People love it. A merchant offers you a pouch of coins to mix more. You take the coins and immediately spend them on soap. You do not know why. You will never use it. There are bad days. A man named Godric punches you when you miss and clamp his tongue. Another man tries to pay you in eggs, but forgets to remove the chickens first. You are pecked vigorously. Someone brings you a molar still attached to a jawbone. You ask why. They shrug. You bury the jawbone and do not ask questions again. You dream of teeth now. Endless rows snapping at you, whispering your name. You wake up with jaw pain that feels suspiciously like guilt. Clotilda the chicken watches from the windowsill. She seems pleased. Eventually, you start making things up. You tell a woman her toothache is caused by a cursed wind. You wave sage near her face. She says she feels better. You give her a dried beet and call it a talisman. She gives you a pair of wool socks. You are now the most comfortable liar in town. The blacksmith wants a gold tooth. You tell him that's ridiculous. He insists. You melt a coin and glue it to a peg. He beams at his reflection in a puddle and tells everyone you're a miracle worker. You correct him. He mishears you and says, "Magical worker." You give up. By the end of the month, you have a collection of teeth in a jar you don't remember starting. You keep it under your bed. You tell yourself it's for study. You never look at it. Someone suggests you open a practice. You laugh until you cry. Then you stop crying and think about it. You imagine a little sign above your door: Tooth Wizard, puller of pains, bringer of chickens. You like the sound of it. You don't know what you're doing, but that's never stopped you before. They say you've been chosen. A great honor, they call it, with a straight face and matching eyebrows that do not twitch even a little, which is impressive, considering. The letter has the king's seal. There's wax and ribbon and a vague scent of lavender trying to distract from what's actually being asked of you. You are to become groom of the stool. You try to pretend that sounds dignified. You fail. It is, you are told, a position of trust. No one is closer to the king than his groom. You nod slowly, digesting this, even as your soul tries to climb out your ears and flee to the forest. You are given a robe. It is velvet, trimmed with gold thread and embroidered with the royal crest. You wear it, though it feels less like a garment and more like a warning label. Your first day begins before dawn. The castle is silent except for the sound of pigeons plotting and servants sweeping with the quiet dread of people who've seen things they cannot discuss. You are led through twisting corridors and up a staircase so narrow you begin to suspect you've been tricked into becoming a chimney sweep. At the top is a door, guarded by two men who regard you with pity. They open it. You enter. The royal privy is not what you expect. There is no porcelain, no water, no glinting handle to flush your regrets away. It is a large wooden chair, sturdy and old, with a hole cut in the center like a mouth mid-scream. Below it rests a carved chamber pot that once, maybe, held something innocent. You are told to stand by. That's the whole instruction. Stand by. The king enters. He is robed in silk and muttering about treaties and venison. He nods at you without recognition, as if you are part of the furniture. You try to disappear into your velvet. It doesn't work. He sits. Time becomes abstract. You listen. Not by choice, but by geography. Royal bowels are not shy. They are, in fact, deeply expressive. The acoustics of the room are unfortunate. You find yourself becoming intimately familiar with the digestive consequences of pheasant, mead, and unchecked power. You learn to keep your face still. You practice finding a spot on the wall to focus on. You pick a crack that looks vaguely like a ship. You name it Gerald. Gerald becomes your anchor. When the king finishes, he lifts a hand. You are to step forward. There are no gloves. There is a cloth. It is monogrammed. You hesitate, and a guard clears his throat behind the door. You do what you must. You clean with the trembling grace of a man whispering apologies to his own dignity. The king hums as if receiving a foot massage. You die, quietly, inside. Afterwards, you empty the pot. You carry it through the castle like it's made of glass and broken dreams. You do not spill a drop. This is your triumph. You rinse it in the servant's basin and whisper threats at anyone who tries to talk to you. No one does. They bring you food, but you cannot eat. The sound of the king's morning symphony replays in your head. You try wine. It helps until it doesn't. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how your life led here. You remember a time you wanted to be a baker. Bread never betrayed you. Bread never made noises like that. The days repeat. You learn to time things. The king likes plums in the morning. This is a mistake. You begin carrying herbs in your sleeves to sniff discreetly. The velvet robe begins to smell of lavender and fear. You try to keep count of how many different sounds a human body can make. You lose count at 17. You receive a gift from the king. A ring, thick and heavy, inscribed with the royal crest. You wear it, though it adds an obscene sort of irony to your already cursed job. You are told this is a sign of trust, that no one has more private access than you. You consider this deeply, and then you stare into the middle distance for a while. Other nobles begin to nod at you in the halls. A bishop once bowed. You are introduced to dignitaries as His Majesty's most personal attendant. You begin to collect polite phrases for your role. Sanitary consultant, stool chamberlain, keeper of comfort. One man calls you the whisperer. You pretend that isn't the most accurate description so far. Sometimes the king talks to you, not about important things, but about hunting, or his back pain, or a dream he had where geese declared war. You nod. You laugh at the right times. You offer a mint from a tin you keep for survival. He accepts. You feel powerful in a terrible, inexplicable way. One afternoon, the king has a bad bout. You fetch the royal physician, who inspects the situation with a look of scholarly horror and prescribes less cheese and more reflection. The king weeps. You hold his hand. He does not squeeze back, but you think he's grateful. You start writing letters to no one, just to have someone to talk to. You sign them, yours, in eternal sanitation. There are moments, brief, fragile ones, where you feel something like pride. When the pot is clean, when the king is content, when your hand doesn't shake as you perform your duties, you begin humming as you work. Little tunes, lullabies for the damned. The guards grow accustomed to it. You are awarded a medal. It is small and smells faintly of silver polish and lies. The inscription reads, "For service and steadiness." You think about throwing it in the moat. You don't. Years pass. You age in velvet. The chair remains. The pot is replaced once, ceremoniously. The king thanks you in a speech. He does not mention your name. He does mention devotion beyond all others. You take this as a compliment. You hang your robe by the fire and drink a mug of something dark and strong. Clotilda the chicken, now old and possibly immortal, sleeps by your feet. You lie in bed at night and think of Gerald, the crack on the wall. You wonder if anyone will ever know what you did, what you endured, what you learned. You do not write it down. Some stories are best left in the pot. You didn't choose this life. You were walking past the castle kitchens one morning, minding your own business, when a cook hurled a goose carcass at someone and shouted, "We need someone who understands dogs." You do not understand dogs. You once tried to pet one and it bit your boot, then apologized by peeing on it. But you made the mistake of pausing. Now you are the official turnspit dog handler, which sounds like a whimsical job in a traveling show, but is, in reality, damp, smoky, and filled with betrayal. The turnspit is a wheel, a large wooden drum mounted in a wall above the hearth, like a hamster cage built by sadists. Inside it, a dog runs. As the dog runs, the wheel turns, and as the wheel turns, a long iron spit slowly rotates the meat suspended over the fire. The principle is simple. The execution is not. Your job is to train the dogs to run in shifts, to keep the meat moving, to keep the cooks from screaming. They used to whip the dogs to make them run. You asked if that still happened. The head cook looked you dead in the eye and said, "Not since the Mutton Rebellion." You don't ask further. You meet your team. 4 dogs, all low to the ground, lean, with legs like coiled springs and eyes that track your every movement. You name them to feel less like a villain. There's Butter, a sweet-faced spaniel who immediately tries to eat your finger. Lard, who sleeps with one eye open. Chive, who likes to bite ankles and then act offended when reprimanded. And Mutton. Mutton is the leader. A scrappy terrier with a crooked ear and the demeanor of a retired assassin. He stares at you like he's remembering something you did wrong in a past life. You offer him a strip of bacon fat. He sniffs it, then takes it slowly, like a bribe he plans to use against you later. You try to pet him. He growls, but politely. You nod in respect. The kitchen is chaos. It smells like fire, grease, and the shouted regrets of underpaid apprentices. Meat drips fat into the flames and sends up sparks. The turnspit groans like an old man being asked to stand. The dogs take their places, trained, you are told. By instinct and hunger, you are handed a stick, not to hit them, just to point. You use it more, to lean on. You whistle. Butter climbs into the wheel and begins to trot. The spit turns. A haunch of venison starts its slow roast. The cook nods. You feel a flicker of pride. Then butter stops. The meat stops. The cook screams. You panic. You coax, beg, flap your arms. Butter yawns. Mutton barks once, sharp and precise. Butter resumes running. The spit resumes turning. You realize mutton has more authority in this kitchen than you ever will. You accept this. Throughout the day, you rotate the dogs. 10 minutes on, 10 off. Lard tries to sneak out of the room twice. Chive bites an apprentice and is rewarded with a bone. Mutton never runs, not unless things are truly dire. He sits in a high place, on a stool, on a sack of flour, once on a roast goose, and surveys the room like a general watching a battle he cannot lose. The meat never roasts evenly. One side burns, the other stays pale. You adjust the spit angle. You whisper encouragement to the dogs. The cook accuses you of sabotage. You point at mutton. The cook pauses. He nods slowly and walks away. You are not sure what just happened. In the evenings, you feed the dogs scraps and wash their paws in a bucket that used to hold apples. You hum a lullaby your mother used to sing. Lard falls asleep mid-chew. Butter curls beside your leg. Chive dreams of war. Mutton watches you from the shadows. You nod. He does not nod back, but you sense approval. Maybe you try to make improvements. You suggest padding the inside of the wheel. You are laughed at. You try switching the order of shifts. Lard pees in your shoe. You attempt to explain heat distribution principles using a chalkboard and 3 potatoes. The cook calls you wheel wizard and throws a leek at your head. One morning, you find a chicken in the wheel. It is not trained. It does not run. The meat does not turn. You remove the chicken. Mutton watches, unimpressed. You begin to dream of wheels, endless spinning, dogs running in silence, meat that never finishes cooking. You wake with a start and find mutton sitting on your chest. You do not scream. You thank him for his vigilance. He drops a sausage into your mouth and vanishes. The job seeps into your bones. You begin counting time and rotations. A roast takes 20 turns of butter, 2.5 of lard, 1 of chive before she bites someone, and then a reluctant finish by mutton when the rest are too tired to continue. You document this on parchment. You title it, The Gospel of the Spit. No one reads it but you. You once thought about being a scholar. You read by candlelight. You debated philosophy with your cousin who sold turnips. Now your greatest debate is whether mutton will run today or simply glare until someone else volunteers. You do not mind. There is a strange comfort in the rhythm, in the smoky warmth, in the soft clatter of paws against wood. One day, a noble visits the kitchens and watches the dogs at work. He claps you on the back and says, "Such clever creatures. Who trains them?" You open your mouth to answer. Mutton barks once, sharp and precise. The noble looks at him, nods, and drops a silver coin into his bowl. You close your mouth. Mutton accepts the payment without comment. You adjust the spit and make peace with your place in the food chain. It's barely dawn, and the sky is already deciding what kind of mood it's in. Gray, damp, somewhere between a drizzle and a personal attack. You're chewing a cold crust of yesterday's bread and staring up at the sagging silhouette of a thatched roof. Your thatched roof, except it isn't really yours. It belongs to a family of 6 who pay you in boiled turnips and vague disappointment. The house is crooked. The ladder is worse. The goat is waiting. You climb slowly, one splintered rung at a time, trying not to think about how many times this week you've done this exact thing. The straw squishes beneath your boots with the moist resignation of a job that knows it's temporary. Rain hisses against your shoulders. Somewhere below, a child sneezes, and a woman blames the wind. You are already being held responsible. The goat climbs halfway up behind you, pausing to chew your tunic. You do not address this. You've learned not to give it the satisfaction. You named it Barrel because it once knocked you clean off the roof and into one. Barrel has never apologized. Barrel does not believe in consequences. You reach the ridge of the roof and survey the battlefield. Loose bundles, broken spars, moss where moss has no business being. You set your tools down with the ceremony of a man who knows none of them will help. The hammer's handle is cracked. The bundle twine is damp and slippery. The thatching needles look like oversized skewers for a feast that never happened. You wedge a knee into the thatch, immediately regret it, and begin tugging out the sodden, defeated sections. A clump falls and hits a chicken below. It screams. The homeowner screams louder. You shout that you're fixing it. She shouts that it wasn't broken until you touched it. This is a lie, but you are too tired to argue with someone holding a broom like a weapon. You work. You hammer. You weave. You stab tufts of straw between laths like you're stuffing secrets into a mattress. The rain picks up, and the wind tries to tear your cloak free. Beryl watches, unimpressed, chewing something that used to be yours. You ask him to help. He headbutts a bucket. Your hands are numb, and your knees ache, and the roof continues to leak with the kind of smug persistence that suggests it's doing it on purpose. You adjust a ridge tile. It slides off and vanishes into the mud. You say a word that gets you glared at by a nearby priest, who is also glaring at the weather, the wind, and possibly God. At one point, you pause to wring out your shirt. It drips like betrayal. A patch of thatch shifts under your weight, and for one heart-stopping moment, you hover between dignity and collapse. You regain your balance by flailing in a way that would have been funny if you weren't holding a sharp tool. You don't fall. Today, you lash the bundles tighter. You jam reeds in where gaps mock you. You whisper to the roof. Promises, threats, bargains, none of them work. Below, the villagers huddle with cloaks over their heads, watching like it's theater. They do not applaud. They murmur. You hear your name followed by the phrase, "last time." You are not invited to dinner. It begins to hail. Of course it does. You shield your face with a scrap of wood and continue. Beryl hunkers behind the chimney like a furry gargoyle, occasionally farting. You reach into your satchel and find a chunk of cheese you forgot was there. It's wet. You eat it anyway. This is the high point of your day. The final bundles are lashed in place with knots you made up because the real ones were too slippery. You smear mud along the joins and pack it down with your palms. It's supposed to seal the water out. It doesn't. You know this. You do it anyway. You climb down the ladder with the slow grace of someone with bruised ribs and low expectations. The homeowner meets you with crossed arms and a look like she smelled something offensive. You explain what you've done. She points at the corner of the roof, where water is already dripping from the eave. You explain that it's temporary. She explains that so is her patience. A child offers you a damp turnip and runs off. A rooster poops on your boot. You bow stiffly and walk away, hoping no one sees you limp. They do. The village elder pats your shoulder and says, "Better luck next week." He says it every time. You think he might be cursed. You trudge back to your shed, which also leaks, though at least you know who to blame. You strip off wet layers and hang them over the fire, which smokes in protest. You sit. The warmth reaches your fingers eventually. You stare at the door and wait for the knock. There's always another knock. Sure enough, it comes just before dusk. A boy, out of breath, holding a thatch sample and a terrified look. He says, "The blacksmith's roof just caved in." You nod. He adds, "There's a goat up there too." You don't ask which goat. You already know. You stand at the edge of the grave, squinting against the sun and trying to look devastated. Not mildly upset, not inconvenienced, devastated. The kind of sorrow that bends spines and makes grown men gnaw their sleeves. You are, after all, a professional mourner. This is your job. To cry, loudly, convincingly, on demand, for people you have never met, and preferably before someone notices that your eyes are bone dry and your sighs are more dramatic than sincere. Today's funeral is for a man named Osric, who apparently made a living shouting at geese. You're not sure how that translates into income, but someone paid him for it, and now someone is paying you to weep over his departure. The widow is in black, clutching a damp handkerchief and sniffling into it like it owes her money. A young man, possibly a nephew or an emotionally confused neighbor, leans against a tree and hums tunelessly. There are 4 actual mourners, 2 chickens, and you. The chickens are more invested. You let out a long sigh and pat your chest like your heart is breaking. No one notices. You cough louder. Still nothing. You start to sway, hoping someone will think you're overcome with grief and not just trying to remember if you latched the barn this morning. The widow lets out a sob, long and shaking. People turn. She's putting in effort. Her sleeves are soaked. You nod, respectful. Then everyone looks at you. Expectantly, it's your time to shine. You clear your throat and attempt a mournful wail. It comes out more like a confused sheep. Someone stifles a laugh. You glare at the chickens. They look away. You close your eyes, dig deep, and try to summon actual tears. You think about the time you dropped a pie face down in the mud. You think about the goose that stole your only good boot. You think about the winter your socks froze while still on your feet. Nothing. Your face remains stubbornly dry. You sniff once, pathetically. A child frowns at you. You resort to theatrics. You clutch your stomach, fall to your knees, and release a sound that echoes across the graveyard like an opera singer being stabbed with a spoon. Someone gasps. The widow sobs harder, possibly in sympathy, possibly in horror. You pound the earth and whisper, "Why, why?" with increasing volume until a man hands you a small cloth to bite down on. You are committed now. You roll onto your side and moan. You whisper Osric's name, drawing it out like a lover's lament. You never met Osric. You once shouted at the same geese, but that's where your relationship ended. Still, you deliver his name with the tremble of a bard in the final act. A chicken clucks approvingly. Someone hands you a chicken leg. You do not know why. Perhaps they believe you've earned it. Perhaps it was Osric's final wish. You take it reverently, as if it's a relic. You do not eat it. Yet, a child throws a turnip at your back. You pause. You consider turning around, standing up, demanding respect for the deeply spiritual and completely fabricated grief you are channeling. But you are lying in the dirt, holding poultry and moaning into the grass. You realize any moral high ground you had evaporated when you wailed, "Take me instead," 15 minutes ago. You continue the performance. The funeral proceeds. The priest says some words. You do not hear them. You are too busy trying to tear your sleeve in anguish without actually damaging it. Fabric costs money. Your money. You fake a quiet sob. It sounds like a hiccup. You turn it into a whimper. You murmur something about lost time and stolen joy. You briefly consider faking a swoon, but last time you tried that, you landed on a rake and bled for 3 hours. As the coffin is lowered, you begin humming softly, something mournful and tuneless. The chickens cluck in time. The widow is now weeping openly into her kerchief, eyes red, nose running. Real grief. Honest, painful, chaotic. You feel a flicker of shame. You smother it with another howl. After the last shovel of dirt is tossed, the crowd disperses. The child who threw the turnip sticks out his tongue. You raise your chicken leg in salute. He retreats. The widow approaches you slowly, still trembling. You brace for it. Complaint, insult, an accusation that you were too loud or not loud enough. She hugs you. Just a quick one, damp and unexpected. She says, "He would have liked that. He always said no one would cry at his funeral." Then she walks away. You sit in the grass, blinking. That's a new one. You head home with mud in your boots, grass in your sleeves, and a chicken leg in your pocket. The turnip bruise on your back will bloom nicely by morning. You think about Osric. You think about his geese. You think about the widow who thanked you for fake grief like it was real. Maybe, just for a moment, it was. You grind. That's all you do. Day in, day out, hour after hour, from the bleary gray of morning until the lamps flicker with tired firelight. You are the pestle. The mortar is the only thing that listens to you. You were told this was an apprenticeship, a noble calling to the art of healing, the science of medicine, the delicate craft of balancing body and soul. What they didn't mention is that you'd spend 98% of your time turning various objects into increasingly fine dust, while an old man yells at plants and calls it science. You arrive before dawn, because the apothecary says herbs are most awake when the dew's still cold. You don't know what that means, but it sounds like nonsense. Still, you gather them. Nettles that bite, mint that wilts when you look at it wrong, bark that smells like wet socks. You stack them in baskets, your hands already stained a permanent shade of greenish-brown that no amount of scrubbing removes. Then you enter the shop, and the real work begins. You grind, you take roots and mash them into pulpy strings. You take leaves and reduce them to bitter, flaky confetti. You take tiny bones. Don't ask whose. You've stopped asking. And crush them into powder so fine it haunts the air like an angry ghost. It gets into your nose, your ears, the crease of your elbows, and somehow your shoes. You've sneezed violet mist. You've sneezed so hard you startled the apothecary's cat. Once, you sneezed bloodroot and saw God. The apothecary watches you sometimes, leaning on his cane like it's a performance, and he's just here for the spectacle. He mutters phrases like, "The essence of foxglove must be persuaded, not forced," and fennel, the coward's cinnamon. You do not understand him. You suspect he does not understand himself. He names your concoctions things like lung reliever number 3 and whimsical balsam, and once sent you outside to bury a jar because it was too angry. You ask him if any of this is medically sound. He tells you your chakras are misaligned from too much skepticism. You go back to grinding. Sometimes he hands you a substance without explanation. You ask what it is. He says, "Try not to inhale." You inhale immediately because it's already halfway up your nose. You feel your tongue go numb and your vision tilt 90 degrees to the left. He nods and scribbles something in his book labeled Experimental Reactions, Pestle Boy Edition. You crush dried frogs, you mash amber, you pound something he calls witch's pepper that smells like burned nightmares and leaves a rash shaped like regret. You once found a human tooth in the mortar. You do not bring this up. You suspect you are not the first pestle boy. You begin to develop theories. If it's green, it will stain. If it smells sweet, it's probably poisonous. If it makes your eyes water, it's either effective or about to be banned. The apothecary has shelves upon shelves of glass jars, none labeled sensibly. Some are just marked with cryptic runes. One is labeled, "Absolutely not for the Duke," which only raises questions. Another just says, "Susan," and you haven't dared touch it. You've started dreaming in textures. Crumbly, moist, gritty, fibrous. You can now identify over 17 types of mold by scent alone. Your fingertips are calloused in strange, uneven ways, from constant pounding. You once crushed something so thoroughly it ceased to exist. You were proud for a moment, until the apothecary looked at the empty mortar and said, "Pity. That was the last of the unicorn dandruff." You cry sometimes, not out of sadness, just because a fine mist of powdered horseradish got into your tear ducts. You've tasted basil, clove, charcoal, and despair. You're fairly sure there's still a bit of sage living behind your left molar. You sneeze so often it's become your form of greeting. The cat sneezes in solidarity. One day, the apothecary gives you a break. He says, "Go fetch me moonwort, but only if it's been sung to." You nod, pretend to know what that means, and wander into the forest hoping to be eaten by something quick and merciful. You return 6 hours later with a handful of weeds and a wasp bite on your eyebrow. He accepts this without question and grinds them himself, declaring it adequate in spirit. Your greatest achievement to date is producing a powder so perfectly balanced that it actually cured someone's cough. Briefly, they immediately developed a rash, but the coughing stopped, so you count it as a win. The apothecary patted your head and called you His little pestle prints. You tried not to cry. Again, horseradish. You no longer smell like a person. You smell like crushed time and vague sorrow. People in the village avoid you. Dogs follow you. One tried to lick your face and passed out halfway through. The baker's apprentice calls you the powder ghost and won't accept coins you've touched. The apothecary says you're learning fast. He says this while handing you a bowl of something pulsating. You ask what it is. He says, ambitious. You go outside and scream into a sack of lavender. You dream of quitting, often. But you also dream of mixing something so potent, so legendary, that you'll be known forever. Maybe a balm that cures heartbreak, a syrup that grants memory, a salve that fixes the back pain you now have at age 17. You dream of finding the recipe for freedom, but mostly, you grind, you write. You always write. You write for a man who wears silk hose in the mud and calls himself Lord Valiant of the Thistle Downs, which is a fancy way of saying the third son of a baron with nothing better to do. He cannot read. He insists he can. But when you handed him his own letter last week, he held it upside down and complimented your exceptional spacing. You've stopped correcting him. It's better for everyone that way. Your desk is a splintery piece of something that might once have been furniture. It wobbles slightly every time you dip your quill, as if possessed by the ghost of stable craftsmanship. The ink you use smells faintly of sadness and mold. Your candles are mostly stubs. The windows don't shut all the way. Everything you own is damp and mildly offended by its own existence. The noble in question is reclining dramatically on a bearskin rug, wearing a fur-lined robe, even though it's midsummer. He's dictating poetry. Again, you scratch the nib across the parchment and try not to groan as he launches into another verse about the curvature of Lady Winifred's elbow. Write this, he says, clearing his throat as if preparing for a duel. O fairest light of my evening sky, whose gaze doth pierce my mortal soul. You pause. My lord, is this for Lady Winifred or Lady Margaret? He waves a hand. Same letter. It applies to both. You glance at the previous line about Winifred's pearl-sweet laugh and make a quiet note in the margin that reads, Margaret has a lisp. You doubt anyone will ever notice, but it gives you a sense of power, the only power you have. He continues with a flourish, describing how both ladies have eyes like glistening fish ponds and how he longs to scale their walls of virtue. You carefully omit that part. You're not about to have your handwriting quoted at a trial. Your days follow this rhythm. Wax seal, lie, wax seal, flattery, lie. You have written 57 letters this month. He has sent them all. You suspect at least 4 have gone to the same woman, who just keeps changing her name to mess with him. You respect her deeply. You used to ask him questions, clarify things. Do you want to tell her about your horse accident? Or, should I mention that you already proposed to her sister? But you've learned. Questions are dangerous. They lead to answers. And answers lead to more dictation. He calls you scribe. Never your name. You've tried telling him. He nodded solemnly and said, Ah yes, scribe. A strong family name. Today he's decided to compose a letter to the king. You blink. The king? Yes, he says, standing now, chest puffed, to request his daughter's hand in marriage. You stare at him. He is currently wearing 2 left shoes and a feathered hat that was chewed by a goat. You dip the quill. You begin. To his most illustrious majesty, sovereign of all that is civilized and mostly paved. He interrupts. Add something about my shoulders. Mention their width and my jousting form. It's very strong. You write, I am known throughout the region for my unique posture and enthusiastic participation in mounted tournaments. He beams. You suspect no one in the royal household will read it either. It's possible this entire continent is just a giant papier-mâché castle built by people who can't read and don't care. You wonder what would happen if you started writing letters to yourself. Would anyone notice? Once, he asked you to compose a poem that compared Lady Beatrice to a falcon. You got carried away. The falcon became a metaphor for death. You rhymed bloodlust with trust. You sealed it with a kiss. Lady Beatrice sent back a dead mouse. You still have it. You keep it as a reminder. You write notes in your margins. Not real ones. Secret ones. Passive-aggressive ones. This stanza was lifted from a tombstone. Do not believe a word beyond this sentence. He does not bathe. So far, no one's noticed. Or if they have, they've chosen to ignore it out of mutual respect for the farce you all inhabit. You're not paid much. Once a month, he gives you a pouch of coins that smells like pickled eggs. You never ask why. One time, you bit into a coin to test its authenticity and cracked a molar. You've since decided it's safer to just accept the pouch and never count. Sometimes you fantasize about escaping, running away to a city where people read their own letters and don't require you to rhyme bosom with blossom 3 times in one afternoon. But you have a warm cloak now, and 3 ink pots, and a decent quill that only occasionally stabs you when you're not paying attention. That's more than most. Today, he dictates another round of letters. 3 to ladies, 1 to a bishop, and a 5th to someone he calls the mysterious widow with the boots. You do not ask, you simply write. The final letter of the day is to a cousin, or possibly a creditor. It's hard to tell. He signs it with a wax seal shaped like a duck. You wonder if anyone thinks that's strange. You light the last candle, stretch your aching hand, and stare at the pile of sealed envelopes. 58 now, each one a small monument to delusion, betrayal, or deeply misguided romance. You wonder, as always, if any of them will be read. You doubt it. You're not a musician. Let's get that clear. No one mistakes you for one, least of all the actual minstrel, who refers to you only as the boy with the hands, even though you are neither a boy nor particularly pleased to be here. Your job is simple, in theory. Restring the lute, maintain the lute, worship the lute, clean the lute gently but thoroughly after Sir Whale and Strum decides to serenade yet another goat herd into temporary madness. You don't get applause. You don't get food first. You don't get a name in the tavern programs. You get a calloused thumb, a splinter in your forefinger, and the intimate knowledge of what happens to catgut in humid weather. You rise before dawn because the strings do. There's dew on the cartwheels and mold in the bread, and neither surprises you anymore. You sleep near the instrument case like a nervous parent and perform routine inspections before the lute even sees daylight. Sometimes the strings have snapped in the night out of pure spite. Sometimes mice have nibbled at the pegs. One time, a feral chicken nested inside the sound hole. You don't talk about that day. The minstrel snores in the hayloft while you wrestle fresh strings onto the warped, temperamental body of a lute that's clearly cursed. He calls it Melodia. You call it that ungrateful wooden fiend. It's never in tune. It hates you specifically. You suspect it senses your dreams of abandoning it in a river. You've restrung the same lute every day for 7 months. You could do it blindfolded. You sometimes do, just to see if anyone notices. No one does. The minstrel, Sir Cedric of the Warbling Plains, has exactly 3 songs in his repertoire. He performs them with the confidence of a man who has never received feedback and cannot read the room or the lyrics. One song is about a lost sheep. One is a bawdy tale involving a pie and a nobleman's wife. The third claims to be a heroic ballad, but mostly consists of the phrase, "Onward ho," yelled at random intervals. You have memorized all 3 against your will. They haunt your dreams. You've begun to assign each verse a corresponding type of despair. The sheep song is melancholy. The bawdy one is mild shame. Onward ho is uncut rage. You're not allowed to play. That's the rule. Not even when the minstrel's fingers are covered in bandages from a tavern brawl with a jealous dulcimer player. Not even when the crowd chants for an encore and he's clearly out of breath and lyrics. You once touched the lute while tuning it and he screamed as if you'd licked his spoon. Hands off, Melodia. he shrieked, clutching her to his chest like a soggy infant. You had to pretend you were merely dusting the frets. He says you're not ready. You say nothing. You fantasize in silence. The other minstrels laugh at you behind your back. String monkey, they call you, which is technically accurate but spiritually crushing. One once offered you a broken lyre and said, "Here, now you've got your own." You threw it into a pig trough and felt nothing. You're becoming immune to insults, praise, and the dulcet tones of someone trying to rhyme wench with trench. Every evening, you sit beside the fire and polish the lute, while Sir Cedric flirts with tavern maids, using metaphors so tortured they might qualify as crimes. You listen as he boasts about his nimble fingers and perfect pitch, neither of which have appeared in public. You've started carving tiny notes into the inside of the instrument. Nothing obvious, just small personal messages like "help me" and "this man cannot rhyme." You know the lute better than he ever will. You've rebuilt its bridge, reinforced its neck, coaxed harmonics from it in the privacy of barns and alleyways. You once played a full song, soft, hesitant, beautiful, while he was passed out drunk in a cabbage field. Even the cows listened. You're not supposed to remember that, but you do. Sometimes you catch Melodia looking at you, or maybe that's your imagination. She makes no sound when Cedric plucks her. Not really, just noise. You wonder if she, too, dreams of freedom. Your food is stale, your pay is theoretical, and your job title includes neither musician nor assistant. Officially, you are miscellaneous support. Unofficially, you are the only reason this entire operation hasn't collapsed into stringy chaos. This morning, a high E string snaps and slaps you across the cheek. You accept this. It's part of the ritual now. You tie on a new one while Cedric paces and hums off key. He claims he's composing a new song. You fear it's about you. Once, a nobleman clapped you on the shoulder after a performance and said, "Splendid work." You opened your mouth to say thank you before realizing he was talking to Cedric's boots. They had more stage presence than Cedric himself. You learn patience. You learn restraint. You learn that you can tie a bowline knot in under 4 seconds, and that catgut can, in theory, be used as a garrote. You learn things you shouldn't. You learn how to wait. One night, during a particularly aggressive rendition of "Onward Ho," the lute snaps a string mid-performance. Cedric freezes. The crowd waits. You move swiftly, silently, and hand him the backup. He takes it without thanks, resumes singing, and you stand there, string in hand, watching him butcher what might have been music. The moment passes, but something inside you doesn't. You restring the lute again that night. As always, gently, expertly. You hum your own song under your breath. It's better than his. It always has been. You are not a minstrel. Not yet. The pigeons hate you. This becomes apparent almost immediately. Somewhere between the third beak to the hand and the moment one of them projectile defecates directly into your open ink pot. You used to think pigeons were sweet, maybe even noble. You were wrong. They are chaos wrapped in feathers, each one powered by spite and millet. You, the newly appointed message handler of his royal post, are now their unwilling concierge, janitor, therapist, and chew toy. No one tells you what the job entails until it's too late. They just hand you a tiny leather satchel and say, "Attach this to Maurice." Maurice stares at you like he has seen things. You believe him. Your first day begins with optimism and ends with a head wound. You enter the dovecote wearing your only clean tunic, arms full of scrolls, posture upright, eyes hopeful. You exit 20 minutes later bleeding from a mysterious location behind your left ear, one eyebrow singed, and your tunic now the color of betrayal. You have learned many things in that short time. Pigeons do not respond to reason. Pigeons do not care about your degree in basic scroll management. Pigeons know fear, but not their own, only yours. The instructions were vague. Tie the message to the leg, they said, then let the bird fly. They did not mention that the birds don't like having their legs touched, or that some have grown large enough to qualify as livestock, or that you'd be the one scrubbing down the perches when one of them eats too many figs and forgets the concept of shame. You name that one Gregory. Gregory knows what he did. You begin to understand the true nature of your role on the fourth day, when a nobleman storms into the pigeon loft, demanding answers. His mistress received a message intended for his tax collector, and now both the mistress and the taxes are gone. You attempt to explain that there was a mix-up in the satchel assignments. Maurice got swapped with Thelma, who only flies to romantic recipients. You try to sound confident, professional. You are holding a pigeon in each hand like it's normal. One of them is actively chewing your sleeve. The nobleman leaves in disgust, muttering something about treason. Later that week, a baker receives an urgent decree about rising grain tariffs. She reads it as a threat, panics, and starts pricing her scones like they contain solid gold. The villagers revolt. Someone throws a turnip at your door. You are summoned before a very irritated steward and asked why your birds are spreading financial terrorism. You attempt to blame the pigeons. The steward glares. The pigeons coo. You are told to be more careful. You go back to your post and cry into the grain bucket. They don't let you wear gloves. That would be unmanly, according to the previous handler, who now walks with a limp and a 1,000-yard stare. Your hands are pecked, calloused, and permanently scented like warm bird. You haven't felt clean in days. You begin to dream of feathers, ominously soft and whispering about lost scrolls. Every morning, you check the flight logs. It's a stack of parchment so inaccurate it might as well be fiction. Some birds haven't returned in months. Others return with extra messages, ones you didn't send. One pigeon, a surly brute named Bertrand, brings back someone else's laundry list and a stick of cured meat. You don't ask questions anymore. You just log it and move on. Sometimes, in rare moments of fragile hope, you imagine improving the system. A new tagging method, color-coded ribbons, personalized satchels. Then a pigeon eats your samples and vomits them into your boot. You stop improving things after that. Rain makes everything worse. The pigeons refuse to fly in it. They look at you like, "Do I look waterproof?" and huddle in corners, glaring. Meanwhile, your messages pile up, unopened, unsent. Someone in the next county is probably planning a wedding or a war, and you're stuck making motivational speeches to birds with trust issues. You try rhyming, you try bribing, you try pleading. Maurice flies directly into a wall. You write the apology notes yourself now. Dear Sir Reginald, the delay in your letter was due to inclement weather and pigeon-related hesitations. You feel no shame anymore. You sign them with your initials and a small doodle of a wing, hoping to pass as whimsical rather than incompetent. Eventually, a pigeon lands on your head. You don't flinch. You don't scream. You simply continue writing, quill steady, eyes hollow. It's your favorite bird, the only one who returns on schedule. Her name is Bramble. She stares down at you with mild pity and a little bit of judgment, like a colleague who knows you're not getting promoted. You stroke her feathers and whisper, "Please don't mess this up." She pecks your scalp and takes off. You accept this. Sometimes you wonder what your life could have been. A blacksmith, a brewer, even a dung cart driver. Jobs with structure, with dignity. But no, you chose letters, words, birds. Now you are the messenger behind the messengers, the forgotten soul in the dovecote who battles illiteracy, weather, and bird droppings, so someone can know that their cousin had a baby, or that taxes are going up. Again, you do not have friends. You have pigeons. You talk to them. You start assigning them personalities. You pretend they talk back. One of them might. You're too tired to check. At the end of each day, you scrub the cages, refill the seed troughs, and stack your messages. You reread the flight list, hoping one day all the birds will return on time. You know they won't. Still, You wait. The air down here isn't so much breathed as endured. It hangs thick and damp in your throat, a mix of mildew, fermented regret, and the unmistakable sharpness of centuries-old royal bowel movements. The castle cesspit stretches under the stone corridors like a forgotten second kingdom, a kingdom where the only subjects are filth, fungus, and rats so large you suspect some of them pay rent. Your job, you're told with zero irony and even less ceremony, is to dredge it, not explore it, not admire it, just dredge. With a hooked pole, a wooden bucket, and the kind of existential dread usually reserved for cursed monks, you are alone. Not in a poetic, peaceful way. In the practical sense, there is no one here to hear your screams or your attempts to whistle your way through the trauma. The corridor to the cesspit is long, narrow, and slopes downward, as if gravity itself is helping guide souls into despair. The torch you carry flickers with reluctance, clearly trying to extinguish itself rather than be party to this nonsense. Your boots squelch. This is a sound that no shoe should ever make. You try not to think about what you're stepping in. You fail. Your imagination is, unfortunately, vivid. The cesspit itself is a wide, sunken chamber, built with the kind of stone that looks like it's holding on to secrets. Everything down here glistens, but not in a festive way. It's the sheen of things that have gone too long without daylight or dignity. You lower your bucket and hear it hit something soft. You hope it's mud. You suspect it's not. No one tells you how often the pit fills. It's not marked anywhere. There's no rota, no schedule, no helpful sign that says you are now ankle-deep in medieval digestive history. The only indicator that the job is overdue is the smell, one that makes your eyes water and your ancestors weep retroactively. You stir the pit like a hellish soup. Things rise to the surface that should not. A boot, a spoon, a jawbone. You name the jawbone, Henry, and try not to get attached. A rat watches you from the ledge. You have seen it before. It has one ear and an air of judgment, like a tutor from a rich family that got demoted to sewer life. You name him Bertrand. He never runs away. He just observes, like he's writing an evaluation of your performance for Satan's HR department. You wonder how long you've been down here. Time moves differently in the cesspit. Your skin puckers. Your thoughts scatter. You catch yourself talking to the bucket. You begin to argue with the bucket. The bucket wins. Sometimes you find things. Coins, rings, the occasional royal seal that someone definitely shouldn't have flushed. You pocket nothing. Not because of integrity, but because every object is coated in a layer of history so pungent, not even the village witch would take it. You once tried to rinse a coin in the stream. The fish left. They don't feed you on cesspit days. No one wants to eat near you. You tried once, taking a bit of cheese out near the stables. A horse passed out. The blacksmith crossed himself and threw a bucket of holy water at your boots. You considered this fair, at night, when you returned to your shed, which technically counts as accommodation because it has walls. You strip down and leave your tunic hanging on a hook outside. The hook is bent. The tunic never dries. It grows new life forms. One morning you find it moving. You burn it ceremoniously and consider writing it a eulogy. There's a boy in the kitchens who once asked what your job was. You told him. He didn't laugh. He just blinked slowly and offered you a single stale biscuit. It was the kindest thing anyone's done in weeks. You cried. You tried to hide it. The biscuit absorbed your tears and tasted slightly better. You develop a strange pride in your work. Not in the way a knight polishes his sword or a scribe perfects his script. No, yours is a pride born from endurance, from knowing that while others toast wine in the great hall, you're the reason they don't drown in their own waste by Thursday. No one thanks you. They never will. But you know, there are rumors that a skeleton lives down here, a previous dredger who lost his way and simply stayed. You haven't seen him, but you leave him offerings, a slice of bread, a pebble shaped like a heart, a rat skull you cleaned with vinegar. You imagine he appreciates the gesture. You imagine he nods in the darkness, his bony fingers still gripping his own bucket, whispering, "Solid technique. Your sense of smell is gone now. It left you sometime around week 3, replaced by a sixth sense for structural dampness and passive-aggressive stonework. You can tell which walls are judging you. Most of them are. The steward once visited. He lasted 45 seconds before he turned green and fled, mumbling something about incense and divine punishment. You were never more powerful than in that moment. You walked a little taller that day, or maybe you just stepped in something buoyant. You don't tell people what you do unless they ask, and even then, you lie. You say you're a subterranean sanitation consultant or waste flow efficiency strategist. They nod, uncomprehending, and move on. You're fine with that. The truth is not for the faint of heart or the easily disgusted. The truth is for those who know that civilization, for all its cathedrals and crowns, still rests on the shoulders of someone willing to carry a bucket into the dark. And that someone, unfortunately, is you. You sit in the cold stone belly of the monastery, cloaked in a robe 2 sizes too big and smelling faintly of beeswax and despair. It's the night watch, and you are not a monk. You are a placeholder, a substitute, a man-shaped object who, crucially, has not yet died from boredom. You were told your job is to keep vigil. You assumed this would be heroic, perhaps involving a sword, at the very least a torch and some ominous footsteps in the dark. Instead, you sit on a stool older than logic, staring into a room full of candles that flicker judgmentally at your every sigh. The monks are asleep, or pretending to be. One of them snores like a man being slowly stepped on by God. Another talks in his sleep, muttering the same word over and over, turnips. You try not to look concerned. There are rules. You must not speak. You must not move more than 3 paces in any direction. You must not let the fire go out. You must ring the bell if you see a demon. You are unsure what qualifies as a demon. You decide not to ask, in case the answer is you. The silence is oppressive, but not in a majestic, spiritual way. It's the kind of silence that highlights every awkward stomach gurgle, every time your shoe rubs slightly against stone, every passing mouse fart. You become aware of your breathing, then your blinking, then your existence as a creature on this plane. You begin to panic, gently and internally, the way a pig might panic if asked to explain theology. You try to pray. You think of a few words. They escape immediately, like mice from a hole. You try to remember the names of saints. You get as far as Bartholomew, and then feel like you've peaked too early. You briefly consider inventing a few saints, just to have someone to talk to. Saint Wilfrid of Lost Socks, Saint Edna of Regret, Saint Marvin the Not Entirely Present. The candles flicker again, this time more dramatically. You stare, wondering if one of them is trying to tell you something, perhaps Morse code. You blink back. One of the flames leans toward you unnaturally, as if trying to whisper. You scoot your stool an inch away and whisper back, "Not tonight, Satan." Your eyes begin to blur. The flames grow halos. The halos begin to sing. You wonder if that's part of the ritual. You wonder if you're supposed to sing back. You try. It comes out as a wheeze. You try again, louder. It is now a hymn, or possibly a cat being stepped on. You stop. Your eyelids droop. Just for a second. Maybe 2. You jerk awake with the sensation of falling off a moral cliff. The stool hasn't moved. The candles are watching you now, and somehow seem smugger than before. You imagine the abbot watching you from the shadows, quill in hand, writing down your every blink and fidget. "Hour 2, subject muttered. "I'm fine to a wall." Not convincing. Possibly possessed. The hours stretch. The night doesn't end so much as continue in several uninvited directions. You begin to see things. Not frightening things necessarily. Just .co-infusing. A chicken walks into the chapel, wearing a small cloak. No one else sees it. You don't know how it opened the door. You don't question it. You name it St. Bartholomew. He speaks to you, softly, in a voice like a lute being strangled. Lie down, he coos. It's what the Lord would want. You do not lie down, but you think about it. At great length, there is a scraping noise behind the altar. You stiffen. This could be it. Finally, something dramatic. You stand, you grip the ceremonial bell, you tiptoe forward with all the grace of a man trying not to wake a ghost. You peek. It is a beetle. Large, shiny, utterly unimpressed. You apologize to it. It leaves. You return to your stool. You have aged, not physically, but spiritually. You are now 112 inside. You feel wiser, also slightly damp. You attempt to recall scripture, any scripture. Instead, your mind conjures the lyrics to a tavern song about a baker and his very aggressive geese. You hum it under your breath. One of the monks stirs. You freeze. The snoring resumes. You exhale like a man who just avoided death by poultry. Time loops. You ring the wrong bell. No one notices. You swap candles when one burns too low. You drop hot wax on your foot. You learn new ways to suffer silently. You make bargains with the ceiling. If it gives you one shooting star through the stained glass, just one, you promise to stay awake. The ceiling remains unimpressed. You lean forward, then back, then forward again. It becomes a rhythm, a sacred dance of slowly losing your will to be conscious. You begin naming the shadows. That one is Jeremy. That one is Margaret. That one might be your reflection. You scold it anyway. Eventually, miraculously, a sliver of dawn peeks through the eastern window. The candles sigh with relief. So do you. You've done it. You have survived the night. You stand, legs asleep, dignity long deceased. You shuffle toward the monk's quarters, your eyes wide and slightly haunted. A novice greets you with a smile and a cheerful, "Ready for your next shift." You nod, but only because the chicken told you to. The boots arrive before the knights do. A pile of them, stacked like defeated enemies in a corner of the barracks. Mud-caked, stiff, and reeking of things not even nature would take credit for. You stare at them like a man forced to choose which disease he'd like to try first. One pair appears to be bleeding. You pretend you didn't see that. The room is quiet, save for the rhythmic wet sound of your rags slapping against hardened leather and your own internal monologue screaming for help. You are not a squire. Squires hold swords. You hold a rag, a wooden brush, and the last vestiges of hope, which slip further away every time you catch a whiff of boot number 4. It smells like something crawled in, held a meeting, and died with regrets. Each pair tells a story, not a heroic one, not even a coherent one. One is crusted with what might be sheep's milk and something else. Another has what you pray is jam, and fear is not. The third pair is missing a soul, and the knight it belongs to insists he lost it in a duel with a boar, but you suspect he tripped over his own dignity. They never remember your name. You are simply boy or you there, or, on particularly charming days, filth wrangler. Sir Aldred gives you a nod when you hand him back his boots, polished to a dull shine and still slightly steaming from whatever unholy puddle he stepped in. You say you're welcome, and he says for what? Which feels correct. Somehow. There's no pay, just meals, cold bread, older cheese, and something the cook insists is stew, but might actually be a dare. You eat it anyway, because hunger is the only thing stronger than your sense of smell now. That, and the haunting knowledge that boots never stop coming. There's always another pair. Another night, with another tale of valor that ends with you on your knees, chiseling dried horse sweat off the heel like it owes you money. One day you decide to rebel. Quietly. You take a needle and thread, borrowed, stolen, no one's quite sure anymore, and stitch a message into the lining of Sir Godfrey's left boot. "Help me," it says in tiny trembling letters. You fantasize about someone discovering it. A queen, maybe, or a curious page boy who uncovers your hidden SOS and leads a charge to rescue you from leather purgatory. But no one ever looks inside, except the dog. He is large. He is damp. He does not like you. He follows Sir Godfrey everywhere, including into the latrines and possibly into battle. Today, he follows the scent of stew or despair, difficult to separate, finds you in your corner behind the tack room, and promptly urinates on your leg. Eye contact is maintained. You are not sure who has won. You rinse in a trough. The water is colder than justice and twice as indifferent. You consider abandoning your post, just walking away into the woods and letting the boots become someone else's problem. But you know they'll find you. Boots always find you. You try to find pride in your work. It's difficult. The boots look the same whether you spend 5 minutes or 5 hours on them. The knights don't care. One of them actually steps in manure on his way out and asks you to touch them up without breaking stride. You polish over it and hope it teaches him a lesson. It won't. There is a hierarchy among the boots. You start to recognize them by scent and scrape. Sir Leopold's are the loudest. They clomp like a man trying to threaten the floor into submission. Sir Baldwin's smell like vinegar and defeat. Lady Elswith's are pristine, which is suspicious. And you suspect she has a second polisher. This offends you on a molecular level. Occasionally, a squire pities you and helps for a few minutes. They always make it worse. One manages to catch a lace on fire using nothing but friction and a curious lack of spatial awareness. Another insists on using apple mash as a cleansing agent because it worked on his mother's boots. His mother, you later learn, made clogs out of clay. The seasons shift. You know this not by the weather, which remains perpetually unkind, but by the substances caked into the boots. Spring brings fresh mud and wildflower goo. Summer gifts you with resin and dead wasps. Autumn is leaves, blood, and the occasional acorn. Winter is a solid block of boot-shaped ice that you must thaw with breath and curses. Your hands are permanently tinted a shade of brown-gray that no alchemist can reverse. Your spine curves slightly to the left now, molded by the years of boot hunch. Your dreams consist of soft cloth, clean air, and boots that clean themselves, which you understand is heresy, but you're past caring. One morning, Sir Godfrey returns from a skirmish with a victorious grin, and one boot missing entirely. "Lost it in the river," he says, handing you the surviving boot and a pheasant feather like their equivalent. You hold the boot. It squelches. You say nothing. You take the boot. You walk away. In the stable, you stare at your needle and thread. You begin a new message, a longer one, perhaps a short memoir, maybe a recipe, something to remind the next person that there was once a soul here. Someone with dreams, dignity, and working kneecaps. You sew in silence, save for the steady drip of something above you. It's either rain or sealing soup. Either way, you keep stitching. The dog enters. You brace for another christening. Instead, he lies down beside you and sighs like an old man giving up. You feel seen. Tomorrow there will be more boots. They will be worse. But for now you write. The needle moves like hope, one stitch at a time. The festival smells like onions, feet, and pipe smoke. Laughter rings out from the puppet stage, where someone is loudly berating a wooden dragon with a spoon. Music twangs off-key from 3 directions, none of which agree on tempo. Jugglers juggle, bakers bark. A man in a squirrel costume is either performing or lost. You wouldn't know. You are stationed in the outhouse row, and not just near it. You are in charge of it. Honor guard of the whole, the fairmaster calls it, slapping you on the back like it's an achievement. He gives you a wooden badge and a ladle. The badge says, "Lavatory officer." The ladle is for, you're not sure. No one explains. Your kingdom consists of 5 wooden privies lined up along a sloping path that smells of destiny, tragedy, and cabbage. You are told to manage the flow, which is a sentence that haunts you immediately. You are to ensure no one sneaks in without paying. No one topples the units. Again. and no one tries to store livestock inside like last year. You have many questions. You ask none of them. There is no time. The crowd comes in waves. You take copper pennies from frantic mothers, twitchy shepherds, and a bard who insists on paying in sonnets. The sonnet is terrible. You let him in out of pity. You do not regret it until he begins loudly narrating his own bowel movement. The goat tethered to his ankle seems unimpressed. By noon, the line stretches longer than your attention span. You are yelled at in 6 dialects, none of them friendly. A man in a bear mask demands priority because he is nobility in disguise. A child screams, "It's happening," and runs toward you, holding a dripping pear. You begin to dream of fire, not metaphorically. At some point, someone vomits directly onto your left shoe. It is not deliberate, but it is also not entirely accidental. He looks you in the eyes as it happens and whispers, "Too much mead." You whisper, "Not enough," and stare at the horizon. In the afternoon sun, the stench becomes a living thing. It grows. It follows you. It judges you. You attempt to burn a scented candle from the soap stall. It melts instantly and fuses to your hand. You are now partially wax. A woman sees this and offers to read your future. She claims you will marry a chimney sweep and die of bees. You believe her. A knight in half armor asks to use the outhouse, but refuses to remove his helmet. You direct him to stall 3. 5 minutes later, he emerges looking changed, not physically, spiritually. He drops a gold coin in your hand and says nothing. You nod solemnly. Some things are beyond language. In a moment of madness, you implement a new rule, an extra fee for bucket access. It is meant as a joke. It is not taken that way. Suddenly, people are tossing you coins with wild urgency. Just in case, they say. You now own a bucket. You are drunk with power. You fashion a second badge. It reads, Manager of Emergency Containment. You begin referring to yourself in the third person. The manager says only 2 per stall. You inform a group of acrobats trying to pile into one unit. They scatter like leaves. You meet a girl named Lettuce who sells pickled things on sticks. She is missing 2 teeth and speaks with the confidence of a queen. She brings you a beat spear and tells you she respects your stance on line control. You consider proposing. A man tries to cut the line, and you deny him with a dramatic arm gesture. Lettuce applauds. It is the best moment of your life. By dusk, your legs are numb, your eyes bloodshot, and your soul has developed a wheeze. But the line is under control. The stalls are still standing. The bucket remains dry. You are victorious. Then, with perfect timing and theatrical horror, one of the outhouses begins to tilt. Slowly, like a tower surrendering to gravity, you run, you shout, you lunge. You are too late. Stall 5 collapses with a sigh and a slosh, its occupant emerging like a phoenix of shame. The crowd gasps. The man nods once, wipes his face with a leaf, and vanishes into the mist. You will never forget him. The fairmaster returns at the end of the day and counts the coins in your jar. You did well, he says, surprised. He gives you a roasted onion and a blanket that smells like goat. You are not thanked. You are not hugged. You are simply no longer needed. You sit beside the smoldering fire pit, eating your onion like an apple, watching the moon rise over the tilting stalls. Lettuce joins you. She's got a splinter in her thumb and beet juice on her chin. She leans her head against your shoulder. You do not speak. Words are for those who have not seen what you've seen. Tomorrow the festival will move on. The puppets will pack up. The mead will ferment into legend, and someone else will be given the ladle. But tonight, under a sky of indifferent stars, you are the king of the bucket. The bell is heavier than it looks. Or maybe your soul has gotten heavier from the sheer weight of irrelevance. Hard to say. You trail behind the town crier like a very polite ghost, clutching a clapperless backup bell and a stack of half-rolled scrolls that smell like wet sheep and ink made from despair. The town crier walks with the solemnity of a man who believes he is very important. He is not. But he is louder than anyone else in a 3-mile radius, and that is enough. You are never introduced, never announced. No one says, "Behold the assistant." No one nods at your presence or tosses you a pity turnip. You are a shadow at the edge of every proclamation, a silent witness to declarations about bread pricing, goat tax updates, and the arrival of mysterious nobles who always leave owing money. Your job is simple. Hand over the scroll, hold the bell, don't drop anything, don't breathe too loud, don't upstage the crier. Once, you cleared your throat during a particularly emotional announcement about latrine relocation, and he didn't speak to you for 2 days. It was the best 2 days of your life. The crier's voice is his entire identity. He oils it nightly with something that smells like vinegar and regret. He hums scales in the morning. He mutters bedtime announcements in his sleep. You know this because you share a barn loft. There is no privacy, only hay and rats. One is named Toby. He's your closest friend. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to speak. Just once. Maybe a small announcement. Something gentle, like new socks now available near the well. Or, please stop throwing cabbages at Father Dunstan. But no, your voice is not trained, and your face lacks the official crinkle of civic authority. You are merely the boy with the papers. You are 26. Today begins like every other. You walk behind the crier as he bellows about grain weights and suspicious clouds. The crowd mostly ignores you both, save for the occasional dog who tries to bite your ankles out of boredom. One child calls you Bell Goblin. You nod. He's not wrong, but then it happens. The crier's voice falters mid-sentence. He makes a wheeze that sounds like a dying kettle. His hand flutters to his throat. He coughs once, twice, then stares at you with the panic of a man who realizes he's about to be replaced by someone who smells like turnip stew. You offer him water. He drinks. He gasps. He gestures dramatically. You think he might be having a spiritual moment, but no, he simply cannot speak. The silence that follows is enormous. It presses down on the town square like fog. People blink. Chickens pause. The baker drops a tray of rolls in shock. Then the crier points at you. Then the scroll. Then the crowd. You blink back. Surely not. You are not the voice of order. You are the carrier of things, the follower of footsteps, the invisible lad. But the scroll is thrust into your hands, and the crowd waits. And for reasons that even you do not understand, you raise the parchment, take one trembling breath, and yell, "Hear ye, hear ye. By order of the Council of Mostly Sober Men, the annual cider levy shall increase by 2 pence per barrel." There is silence. Then there is screaming, booing, wailing. Someone throws a parsnip. You duck. It hits the crier, who tries to retaliate with hand gestures but only succeeds in looking like an angry bird. A woman faints. A man draws a spoon with intent. You begin backing away, smiling weakly, waving your hands in what you hope is the universal gesture for, "Please don't flay me." The crowd surges. The scroll flutters out of your hand like a doomed dove. You run. You run past the bakery, past the pig pen, past your own mother who pretends not to know you. You trip on a cobblestone and fall directly into a cart full of wet laundry. You emerge looking like a ghost with damp bloomers on your head. The crowd roars. You ring the bell for help. No help comes. You dart into an alley, gasping, legs shaking, heart pounding like a drum solo played by a nervous squirrel. You crouch behind a barrel, clutching the bell like it's a holy relic. Somewhere in the distance, the crowd begins arguing with itself about whether taxes are real or just made-up numbers shouted by men in hats. Eventually, the crier finds you. He cannot speak, but manages a series of aggressive gestures that might mean, "You're fired," or "I need tea." Hard to say. You offer him the bell. He takes it. He rings it weakly and looks mournful, like a rooster who's lost his crow. You nod in solemn solidarity. The two of you walk back to the square. The crowd has dispersed. The baker is crying in a pile of rolls. The man with the spoon is now dueling the squirrel costume juggler. No one notices your return. No one ever does. Back in the barn loft, the crier gargles with his vinegar tonic while you stare at the ceiling. Toby the rat curls up on your chest like a small, judgmental scarf. You consider a life in the woods. You imagine announcing things to trees. Attention, moss is slippery today. The trees would listen, probably. You fall asleep still clutching the bell. In your dreams, it works. In your dreams, you announce something, and no one throws produce. Just once, you'd like to say, "Good news." You begin with cold hands and colder water. The morning mist hasn't even lifted from the hills when you are already ankle-deep in a basin that smells like damp ghosts and other people's shame. Your job is simple in theory. Clean the laundry of those whose names are sewn into collars and echoed in dinner prayers. Nobles, priests, even the apothecary, with suspicious stains in unspeakable places. Their linen flows into your life like a river of sin and starch. You scrub with ashes. You pound with stones. You whisper prayers to whatever gods govern mildew. Sometimes you sing, not because you enjoy it, but because humming distracts you from the feeling that someone's bloomers are staring into your soul. You try not to form attachments, but after the third time Sir Gregory's under tunic comes in stiff with wine and something that might be eels, you start to judge. And once you judge, you cannot stop. You develop a system, a secret, sacred ranking. The decent, possibly hygienic pile is small. Lady Agnes, to your astonishment, always returns her petticoats neatly folded, stained only with rosewater and the mild scent of lavender and political ambition. You consider elevating her to honorary sainthood. Then there's the "we must never speak of this" pile, which requires its own corner, its own bucket, and sometimes its own fire. You learn more about the townspeople than you ever wanted to. Who eats too many beets? Who doesn't believe in undergarments? Who has a romantic tryst involving what looks like treacle? You try not to speculate, but speculation is what gets you through the hours. The moment you accept that Baron Edric's nightshirt smells suspiciously like goose, your imagination does the rest. Laundry days are long, endless. Your fingers are permanently pruned. Your wrists ache from wringing out tunics thick enough to double as tents. The sun rises and falls with you hunched over a bucket, surrounded by lines of linen like ghost flags waving in surrender. Occasionally, a gust of wind sends someone's intimate garments flying across the village green. You run after them. You retrieve a noblewoman's bloomers from the mouth of a cow. You return them with dignity. She does not thank you. You hear things. Oh, you hear things. Voices through thin windows while you gather the weekly loads. Snippets of gossip, confessions, moans. Sometimes from joy, sometimes from whatever passes for marital duty. You hear the vicar sobbing while he irons his cassock. You pretend you do not. You know secrets now, secrets that cling tighter than wet wool. Then there's the soap. It is not soap. It is lye and lies, mixed with herbs that you suspect are just weeds with fancy names. Your hands are raw. Your sleeves are soaked. Your dreams are filled with bubbles and silent screaming. You once tried to wear gloves. They laughed. You once asked for help. They sent you more laundry. Children mock you. They call you linen leech. A boy throws a sock at you. You throw it back, harder. It was not his sock. It was Lord Bertram's ceremonial left sock. You are lectured for an hour about honor and foot decorum. You consider faking your death. There is no privacy in your job. Not for you, and certainly not for them. You know who is ill before the healer does, just by the color of their sheets. You know who lies, who drinks, who sneaks off into the woods with someone else's servant. Laundry does not lie. It may wrinkle, it may reek, but it always tells the truth. You begin to feel like a prophet with a scrub brush and deep emotional damage. Sometimes they watch you work. not to admire your dedication, but to ensure you don't steal their precious linens, as if you have time to start a side hustle selling mildly cursed chemises. They speak as if you are invisible, which, in a way, you are. You've become part of the scenery, a fixture, a human ringer. Someone once used you as a coat rack while delivering new stains. You've seen things. You've washed things. You've reached into pockets and found dried frogs, uncut cheese, and a single silver coin that you returned, because you are not a thief. You are a broken man with integrity and socks to bleach. At night, you cannot sleep. Your arms twitch with phantom rinsing. You smell phantom starch. You dream of noble underpants chasing you through the forest. You wake in a cold sweat, only to realize the cold sweat belongs to someone else's nightgown. It never ends. You once tried to unionize. You and the candle boy and the stable muck lad drew up a charter. It lasted one day, before the steward laughed so hard he choked on a mutton bone. The charter now lines the bottom of a chamber pot. You know this because you had to wash it. There is no glory in cleanliness, no song for the one who makes other people presentable. You are the silent architect of appearances. You make the noble look noble. You remove the mortal grime that clings to their embroidered holiness. You carry their sins on your washboard. No one thanks you, but you know them, all of them, more than they know themselves. You know what they wear when they think no one sees. You know who folds, who crumples, who leaves things crusted in ways that can never be explained by God or science. You hold their dignity in your soapy, shaking hands. One day, maybe, you will disappear. Walk into the river with an armful of scandalous stockings and never return. They will wonder where you've gone, briefly, until their drawers begin to stink and no one else will touch the bishop's trousers. Then, and only then, will they know your worth. You begin with a burlap sack, an optimistic heart, and a vague promise from the abbot that herding cats builds character. You assume this is metaphor. It is not. The monastery has a mouse problem, a rat rebellion, possibly a rodent-led coup, and someone, namely you, must deploy the only creatures nature has equipped with both claws and total emotional detachment. You are not trained in feline negotiation. No one is. You are simply told, find cats, bring cats, contain cats. Contain being the operative word, the tragic word, the word you will carry with you into your next life. You start in the village square, offering scraps of salted fish and awkward affection. The cats accept neither. They look at you the way nobility looks at taxes, with deep suspicion and a readiness to bolt. One of them, striped, scarred, and shaped like a loaf of bad decisions, takes a swipe at your offering hand and disappears under a cart. You bleed into your shoe. A child points and laughs. You are initiated. You try again with milk. It attracts ants. Eventually, you find a cat who does not run. It simply lies there in a pile of hay, tail flicking like it's considering its options. You approach gently, reverently, like a man approaching an unpredictable god. The cat stretches, yawns in your direction, then leaps gracefully onto your shoulder and proceeds to claw its way up to your scalp like you are a ladder made of meat. You do not scream. You don't want to scare it. Or you. You hold very, very still. This is how you return to the monastery. Bleeding, shaky, one cat riding your head like it owns land rights there. The monks nod solemnly, as if this is normal. Perhaps it is. You have lost your sense of normal. They clap. One cat down. You need more. The next cat is less cooperative. You corner it behind the blacksmith's barn, where it hisses like it's possessed by 7 minor demons and lunges at your ankle with the fury of someone who remembers you from a past life. You scoop it into your sack. It screams. You scream. You both fall into a puddle. Somehow, you end up with a mouthful of hay, 3 new scratches, and a sudden awareness that this job is permanent. By nightfall, you have 4 cats. They hate you and each other. You set them loose in the monastery's grain room, hoping for divine intervention, or at least moderate carnage. One cat disappears into the rafters. Another sits, unmoving, staring directly into the face of Brother Elric until he excuses himself to vomit behind a curtain. The third cat climbs your robes and promptly falls asleep across your chest like a furry judgment. The fourth cat takes a mouse, kills it, leaves it on your pillow, and then pees on your spare robe. You interpret this as progress. You try to name them for ease of management. The one who bites you most is called Justice. The sleepy one is Regret. The rooftop ghost is called Smoke. The one with murder in its eyes and urine in its soul is Margaret. They do not respond to their names. They respond to nothing. They eat when they want, scratch when they're bored, and sleep in places you specifically ask them not to. You find cat hair in your soup. You find a cat in your soup. You no longer question this. Some nights, you dream of herding sheep, gentle sheep, who baa softly and move in unison and do not defecate in your bedroll while making direct eye contact. Those dreams are brief. Each morning, you check the grain room. Fewer mice, more cat droppings. The monks say this is balance. You say this is a hostage situation. Brother Aloysius suggests a whistle, something to call the cats to order. You try. The cats stare at you like you just insulted their lineage. You throw away the whistle. The cats retrieve it and hide it in your boot. It squeaks when you walk. They laugh, internally. You learn to accept small victories. Margaret does not pee on your cowl 2 days in a row. Smoke returns from the rafters with the severed tail of what was probably a rat and possibly something worse. Regret brings you a frog. Justice claws only one monk during prayers, and it's the monk who said cats were overrated. The monastery becomes quieter. Fewer squeaks, more purring. Brother Elric begins leaving fish heads by the chapel door. Brother Martin knits a small cat-sized robe. You find this disturbing but choose not to investigate. There are rumors now that you have powers, that you speak the language of beasts, that you have a tail. You do not correct these. The cats seem to approve of your growing legend. One of them kneads your chest for exactly 5 seconds before biting your nipple and vanishing into the night. You take this as affection. The abbot thanks you with a nod and a loaf of bread. The cats eat the bread. You eat the crumbs. You try to feel respected. One morning, you wake to find all 4 cats sleeping on your blanket. You are pinned in place by fur, claws, and the weight of unexpected trust. You do not move, not because of comfort, but because you are afraid to disturb the peace or your bladder. It is unclear who is in charge anymore. You used to be a person. Now you are a cat herder. But not just any cat herder. You are the cat herder, the one who walks the line between order and chaos, between monastery and meow. You begin wearing a belt made of yarn, partially for function, partially in solidarity. The cats follow you sometimes, not always, never on command, but sometimes. When the wind is right and the moon is full and you smell like herring, they follow you, and that is enough. You no longer cry, not because you are stronger, but because crying implies resistance, and you, dear herder, have surrendered to the paw. You don't get a title, you don't get a horse, you don't even get a hat. What you get is a job, a mouth that works, and the ability to stand still for extended periods while trying not to yawn audibly during declarations of wheat pricing policy. You are a herald's echoer, the human version of yelling, "What he said," but louder, and preferably with more teeth. The herald rides in, chest puffed out like a peacock with property rights. He unfurls a scroll the length of your childhood trauma and clears his throat with theatrical menace. You brace yourself. It begins. Oyez, oyez, he shouts, which is how important people say, listen up, when they want to sound like they're being paid by the syllable. You echo it, loudly, dramatically. You add a flourish with your arm for flair. Someone in the crowd laughs. You pretend that was intentional. Then comes the content. By order of Lord Alric of the Golden Hound, Third of his name, defender of the brook, heir to the leftmost turnip field. You echo it. All of it. Including the unnecessary genealogy, because protocol demands accuracy, and no one wants to get flogged over a misattributed turnip field. Halfway through, leftmost, a toddler throws a rock. You flinch, but continue. You are a professional. The decree continues. There's something about cheese regulation, then eel smuggling again, and then a long-winded metaphor involving honor, mud, and the Roman Empire. The herald pauses only to breathe and glare at you like you're the one who wrote this nonsense. You repeat it all, with feeling. Your voice cracks on eel. You power through. The crowd, understandably, begins to drift. You try clapping for emphasis. You try pacing. You try raising your voice an octave, as if you're introducing a traveling circus instead of a tax hike. Nothing helps. It's still boring. The herald continues regardless, now deep into clauses about manure storage and what qualifies as excessive clanging after sunset. You lose consciousness with your eyes open for a few seconds. Then comes the moment. The herald coughs. Not dramatically, actually coughs. His throat betrays him mid-sentence, just after whereas no goats shall henceforth, and before, be painted blue on festival days. He gestures at you. Your time has come. You are the voice now. You could say anything at all. But you start with the line he choked on, because you are, despite everything, committed to the craft. You say it clean. Then you pause. The crowd leans in. And for reasons you will never fully understand, you improvise. And all public dancing must now be performed with at least one goose present. Silence. Then laughter. The people laugh. One man claps. Another shouts. Where do we get the goose? A child salutes you. You keep your face solemn, nod gravely, and move on to the next item. Entirely fabricated. All mead shall henceforth be stored in socks. You can see the herald recovering, ready to interrupt. But you raise your hand. You have the scroll now. You are the scroll. The people are riveted. A woman starts sketching your likeness on parchment. The town reeve takes notes. Taxes will now be collected in hugs or onions, whichever is funnier. You are a god among peasants. The herald finally recovers his voice, croaking something about insubordination and what in the holy relics is going on. But no one hears him. They hear you. You, who brought life to the endless droning. You, who dared to imagine a goose-led future. You keep going. You invent a decree that mandates dance-offs to resolve minor property disputes. You outlaw boredom. You name yourself Deputy Echoer of Echoes and create a holiday in your honor. Effective immediately. The herald storms off, red-faced and sputtering. You keep shouting. Later, when things calm down and your voice begins to fray, you realize your feet hurt and your throat is raw. But people are smiling. A boy hands you an egg in thanks. A goose waddles up and honks as if to affirm your choices. It is unclear where the goose came from, but it accepts a pat on the head and remains by your side like a feathered bodyguard. You return to the clerk's tent, scroll in hand, expecting a lecture, maybe even a fine. Instead, the clerk looks at you and says, "That was the first time anyone stayed past the cheese clause. You're hired." You're confused. You were already hired, weren't you? "No," he says. "That was a trial run." You consider asking what would have happened if you failed, but decide some mysteries are better left unearthed. Instead, you nod, take the goose, and prepare for your next performance. Because now, they expect entertainment. The next morning, you rehearse. You try out accents. You experiment with pacing. You make up backstories for the Lord's relatives, including a second cousin named Elbert, who accidentally married a scarecrow. You test your voice on hillsides and to startled shepherds. You are becoming legend. The villagers greet you with excitement now. Children wave. Adults offer suggestions. "Can you make him ban Mondays?" someone asks. "Can you declare me the Duke of Cheese?" asks another. You promise nothing, but you wink. They cheer. You still have to say the real decrees, of course. Those are non-negotiable. But now, every third statement is yours. A little flourish, a harmless embellishment, a creative twist. Henceforth, all ferrets must be addressed as Sir. A round of applause shall follow every sneeze. Anyone who speaks ill of pie shall be tried by pie. Hen least to be 4,000. On the stain on the smarg. In the smarg. In Lee 4. You are watched. You know this. The clerk, the herald, the guards. They watch you. But they don't stop you. Because for the first time in years, the people are listening. You still echo. But now, the echo is yours. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's not a single smell, which would be merciful. It's a tapestry of horror, a bouquet of damp cloth, regret, animal ghost, and cloves. Always the cloves. You don't know why, and you're too scared to ask. The butcher tells you they're for aromatic balance, but his beard is full of what might be spleen, so you don't press. You are the apprentice sausage stuffer. Congratulations. Your parents are proud in that distant, hopeful way that says they think this is just a phase. It's not. This is your life now. You wake before dawn. You tie back your hair. You pray, because superstition is all you have left. Then you plunge your arms into a wooden tub of what once vaguely resembled meat. They call it filling. You call it a betrayal of nature. It's ground so finely it looks smooth, like it has secrets. It jiggles when you poke it. It sighs when you stir it. You try not to look directly at it too long in case it gains sentience. The casings are worse. They're made of intestines. You are told this cheerfully, as if that somehow makes it better. They are rinsed and stretched and coiled like the world's most untrustworthy ribbon. They smell like something you're sure no one ever meant to smell. You try to focus on technique. Gentle hands, steady rhythm, no sudden movements. The first time you rupture one, it sounds like a wet balloon being judged by God. The butcher nods, pats you on the shoulder, and says, "It happens." You wish it hadn't happened to you, in front of everyone. While the merchant's daughter was watching, you learn the process. Scoop the filling, feed the casing, turn the crank, twist, repeat. It sounds simple. You thought it would be simple, but you were a fool. The meat fights you. It clogs the funnel. It burps. It escapes in odd spurts, like it's trying to make a break for it. You keep going, elbow deep in meat paste, your sleeves long since abandoned as a lost cause. The butcher is humming. It's a jaunty little tune that no sane man should hum while up to his wrists in kidneys. You hum along eventually, out of a kind of survival instinct. It helps distract you from the fact that the casing just wrapped around your finger and won't let go. You are being held hostage by a sausage. Sometimes the meat has things in it, unidentifiable things. You once found what might have been a tooth. No one could confirm. You told the butcher. He just said, "Extra calcium," and went back to whistling. You have nightmares now. They smell like cloves. The finished sausages are hung up on hooks, long ropes of them. They sway gently when you walk past, as if whispering to each other about your failure. You tie the knots too loose, or too tight, or in such a way that they resemble the butcher's ex-wife. You didn't mean to, but he noticed. You're not allowed to tie them anymore. You get paid in coppers and a sausage you made yourself. You don't eat it. You know where it came from. You saw what went into it. You watched in slow horror as it oozed into shape, as if daring you to one day consume it. You give it to the dog. The dog sniffs it and walks away. At night, your hands still smell. You've washed them, scrubbed them, soaked them in vinegar, ash, and river water. It doesn't matter. The scent clings to you like guilt. Your dreams are a parade of sausages. Some wear hats. One asks you for a dance. You wake screaming. The butcher says you're doing better. You no longer cry when the filling touches your elbow. Your twisting motion is passable. You've only broken 3 casings today. Progress. He claps you on the back, leaves a bloody handprint, and wanders off to talk to the liver supplier. You stand alone, surrounded by meat, casing, and existential dread. You try to make peace with it. You invent stories for the sausages. This one is Percy, a nobleman trapped in tube form for crimes against the crown. That one is Agnes, who simply wanted to dance. You start giving motivational speeches to the filling. Today we make symmetry, you whisper. Today we redeem yesterday's mistake. The filling plops in response. You interpret it as agreement. Eventually, market day arrives. You wheel out the sausages on a cart, smiling through the trauma. Townsfolk gather. They buy your creations. One lady holds a link up to the sun, inspecting it like a jeweler, examining a cursed gemstone. She nods and hands you a coin. It feels like victory. Then someone asks what's in them. You pause. You consider honesty. You lie. Pork and spice, you say. It's technically not wrong. They nod. You are safe. For now. Back in the shop, the butcher tells you to prepare a fresh batch. A new sack of mystery meat is dropped at your feet with a wet thud. You stare at it. It stares back. You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and begin again. The sausage never ends. You sit outside the bakery on a crooked bench that leans a little to the left, just enough to remind your spine that life is about compromises. The bread in your hand is technically food, in the sense that it came from a bakery and isn't currently trying to kill you. It's the kind of bread you could use to build a defensive wall or fend off a small bear. You chew it slowly, solemnly, like a man mourning both his molars and his dreams. You are 24 years old. You have been 24 for 3 days, and already it feels excessive. You've done it all. Every job, every apprenticeship, every ill-conceived opportunity that started with a cheerful village elder saying, "It builds character," and ended with you covered in fluids you never identified and no longer wish to. You've herded cats. You've polished boots for men who couldn't remember your name but could remember how to track blood through a feast hall. You've shouted proclamations you didn't believe, mourned strangers more convincingly than their own relatives, and once spent a week under a castle with only rats in your thoughts for company. The rats were better conversationalists. You're not jaded, exactly. That would require energy. You are beyond jaded. You are seasoned, cured, hung up in a cool cellar, and left to acquire a firm philosophical rind. You stare into the middle distance. It's a good distance. It contains nothing. You have become fluent in nothing. You watch it like a scholar, parsing the subtle shifts in light and breeze, and the occasional village chicken attempting an act of rebellion against the local fence system. You could stop it. But why? A child approaches. You do not know this child. They are sticky, as most children are, and wield a half-eaten turnip like a weapon. They look at you like you might know something. You pity them. "What do you do now?" the child asks. You take a long, slow bite of your bread. The chewing process takes enough time for you to consider your entire life and half of someone else's. You swallow with effort and dignity. "Nothing," you whisper. "Gloriously nothing." The child does not understand. Of course they don't. They still believe in purpose, in direction, in futures filled with banner-waving parades and meaningful careers. You remember that feeling. It's quaint. You watch them run off to chase a pig or scream at a sibling, and you marvel at their knees, unscarred and full of optimism. You lean back, feeling the bench creak beneath you, and stretch your legs. You have learned things, too many things, most of them terrible. You've learned which type of dung burns hottest. You've learned where to pinch a sausage casing to avoid explosive meat loss. You've learned that nobility, when confronted with their own undergarments, will lie to your face without shame or accuracy. And you've learned that peace isn't something you find. It's something you declare out of sheer exhaustion. Sometimes people pass by and ask if you're waiting for something. You tell them yes. They don't ask what. It's better that way. Let them imagine a noble cause, a letter from the king, a prophecy. In truth, you're waiting for the sun to move a little, for the birds to change shift, for the baker to toss out a day-old roll soft enough to chew without injury. You have begun ranking clouds, not by size or shape, but by potential for drama. Today's winner resembles a horse fleeing an awkward conversation. You overhear snippets of other people's problems. Lost goats, marital disputes, mysterious smells in the churchyard. You offer no advice. You are retired. You have transcended advice. You are the village's decorative elder at age 24. The youth think you're eccentric. The actual elders think you're either cursed or very wise. You let them wonder. The butcher's apprentice walks by, reeking of cloves and meat regret. You nod solemnly. He nods back with the wide-eyed look of someone who hasn't slept in 4 days and has bonded emotionally with a bucket. You recognize the signs. He's still in the thick of it, still twisting links and pretending to have dreams. You want to tell him it gets better. You also want to tell him it doesn't. A breeze kicks up dust from the road, and you lift your crust of bread like a toast to the sky. The wind answers with a leaf to your face. You accept this as part of the conversation. Someone hands you a cup of something warm and vaguely alcoholic. You're not sure who. You thank them anyway. They might be real. You sip and taste honey and herbs and a hint of poor judgment. Perfect. You are not old, but you are tired in the way that ignores numbers and looks straight at your soul. You don't crave excitement. You don't chase meaning. You don't even blink at chickens anymore. You are in a state of pure, philosophical reclining. This is retirement, you think. It isn't gold or land or status. It's being able to say no without explaining. It's refusing a task by simply closing your eyes and pretending to nap. It's sitting in the sun while the world turns and deciding you've earned this one quiet moment, even if it's the only one you get today. A bee investigates your cup. You share. Why not? You're not using it for anything important. You glance around and realize no one is screaming. Nothing's on fire. The pigs are where they should be. You take another bite of your bread and consider that peace is fragile. You treasure it accordingly. Tomorrow you might help fix a fence. Or not. You haven't decided. Today, you sit. Today, you breathe. Today, you retire.